Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. The first giggle made me freeze at my desk. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I hadn't moved from my chair in 3 hours, grinding through end-of-quarter reports. The sound drifted through the empty office space, high-pitched and quick, like someone trying to stifle their laughter. My fingers stopped typing mid-sentence. I work on the 14th floor of the Riverside Corporate Center, and I'm the only one with access to this floor after 7 p.m. The cleaning crew comes through at 6 and security does their rounds at 8. After that, it's just me and the occasional hum of the HVAC system. I like it that way. The solitude helps me focus, especially during crunch periods like this one. Another laugh, louder this time. Female. Definitely coming from the direction of the main conference room. My shoulders tensed up, and I felt my heart rate kick up a notch. I pushed my chair back slowly, trying to minimize the squeaking of the wheels on the carpet. The conference room door was closed, just as it had been all day. I hadn't gone in there once. No meetings were scheduled, and I'd been buried in spreadsheets since arriving at 8 a.m. The blinds were drawn, blocking any view inside. A soft thud came from behind the door, followed by what sounded like whispering. My mouth went dry. I stood up, my legs shaky, and grabbed my phone from the desk. The screen showed no new notifications, no missed calls. The floor's access log would show if anyone else had come up. I checked it compulsively throughout the day, a habit from when I first got promoted to senior manager. No entries since the cleaning crew left. Another thud, harder this time, then scraping like furniture being moved. The sounds were impossible to mistake now. People were in that room. But I had the only key card that worked on this floor after hours, and I'd been sitting 20 feet from that door for the past 15 hours. I walked toward the conference room, my shoes making soft sounds on the carpet. The motion-activated lights in the hallway blinked on, harsh fluorescent making me squint. More whispers leaked through the door, too muffled to make out words. I pressed my ear against the cool metal surface. Just a little longer. A woman's voice. Unfamiliar. Shh. A man, followed by another giggle. My hand shook as I reached for the door handle. I knew it would be locked. I'd checked it myself when the cleaning crew left, like I did every night. The handle turned with a click. It wasn't locked. I yanked my hand back like I'd been burned. The door handle had been ice cold, much colder than it should be. My breath came in quick bursts now, and sweat beaded on my forehead despite the office's aggressive air conditioning. More movement inside. The scraping sound again, followed by a rhythmic tapping. My security training kicked in. I should call building security, let them handle this. My phone was still in my hand, screen dark. I tried to unlock it, but my sweaty fingers kept slipping on the screen. The giggling stopped abruptly. Complete silence fell, broken only by my rapid breathing. Then, 3 sharp knocks on the door, right in front of my face. I stumbled backward, nearly falling. My phone clattered to the floor. The knocking came again, more insistent. The door handle began to turn slowly, deliberately. I ran. There's no shame in admitting it. I sprinted back to my desk, grabbed my laptop bag, and made for the emergency stairs. Behind me, I heard the conference room door open. The sound of it hitting the wall echoed through the empty office. Don't look back. That's what every instinct screamed as I shoved open the stairwell door. But I did look back, just for a second. The conference room door was wide open. The lights were off inside, but I could make out shapes moving in the darkness. More than 2. More than should be possible in that space. And they were flowing out of the room like smoke, but wrong, moving against gravity, spreading across the ceiling. I took the stairs 3 at a time, nearly falling twice. My chest burned, but I didn't slow down until I hit the lobby. The night security guard looked up from his crossword puzzle, startled by my explosive entrance. "Everything okay, Mr. Matthews?" I couldn't speak, just pointed up. He called for backup, and within minutes, 3 guards were heading up to the 14th floor. I waited in the lobby, gulping water from the cooler and trying to stop my hands from shaking. They found nothing, of course. The conference room was empty, everything in its place. No signs of entry, no evidence anyone had been there. The security footage showed no one entering or leaving the floor after the cleaning crew. The guard suggested I was working too hard, seeing things after too many late nights. I nodded, played along, told them I'd probably just been jumpy, that the sounds were probably just the building settling. They gave me concerned looks as I left, but I didn't care. I knew what I'd heard, what I'd seen. I called in sick the next day, something I hadn't done in 3 years with the company. Spent the morning researching the building's history on my laptop, combing through local news archives. Found nothing unusual, nothing that would explain what happened. When I went back to work 2 days later, I requested a transfer to our downtown office. My boss was surprised. The 14th floor office was considered a perk, a sign of status. I told him I needed a change of scenery. He approved the transfer, but I could tell he was disappointed. I still had to wrap up some projects before the move, which meant going back to the 14th floor. I only went during daylight hours, and I wasn't alone. I'd scheduled meetings throughout the day, made sure there were always other people around. The conference room door stayed closed. Sometimes walking past it, I'd hear something, a soft scratch, a whispered word. But I never opened that door again, never stayed past sunset. The reports could wait until morning. A month after the incident, I was settling into my new office downtown when an email caught my eye. Building management announcing renovations on the 14th floor of Riverside. They were gutting the entire floor, including the conference room. The next day, I got a call from my old boss. His voice was strange, tight. Asked if I'd heard about what they found when they started the demolition. I said no, trying to keep my voice steady. The strangest thing, he said. When they took down the conference room walls, they found an old door behind the drywall. Sealed up, looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. But here's the weird part. It was locked, and when they finally got it open, it didn't lead anywhere. Just opened into the exterior wall. I thanked him for letting me know and hung up before he could say more. Turned off my phone, closed my laptop. Sat in my new office watching the sun set through windows that faced away from Riverside Corporate Center. Sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that door they found. About what it might have been sealed up to keep in, or keep out. About the things I heard in that conference room, the shapes I saw moving against gravity. But mostly, I think about the laughter. How human it sounded at first, until it wasn't. How it changed in those last moments before I ran, becoming something that shouldn't have been possible with human vocal cords. I don't work late anymore. When the sun starts to set, I pack up and leave, no matter how much work is left to do. My productivity numbers have dropped, but I don't care. Some things are more important than quarterly reports and performance reviews. Last week, I ran into one of the security guards from that night. He was working at a different building now, and he looked older, tired. He recognized me immediately. "Still pulling those late nights, Mr. Matthews?" I shook my head. He nodded slowly. "Smart man. You know, we never told you what we really found that night." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "The conference room was empty when we got there, yeah, but the table, all the chairs around it were warm. Like people had just been sitting in them, and on the whiteboard..." He trailed off, rubbing his face. "What was on the whiteboard?" I asked, not sure I wanted to know. "Fingerprints. Dozens of them, all over it. We dusted them, ran them through the system. No matches, but..." He swallowed hard. "They weren't right. The patterns, the whorls. Our tech said they didn't look human. Said he'd never seen anything like them." I thanked him and walked away quickly, trying not to run. That night, I dreamed of the conference room, of the door handle turning, of shapes moving in darkness, of laughter that started human and became something else. I woke up at 3 a.m. drenched in sweat, with a familiar sound echoing in my ears, the soft scrape of furniture being moved, followed by muffled giggling. But when I turned on the lights, my apartment was empty. The sounds were just in my memory, or at least, that's what I tell myself. I saw in the paper yesterday that they're tearing down Riverside Corporate Center. Something about structural issues, the foundation being unstable. They're starting with the upper floors and working their way down. I wonder if they'll find more sealed doors. Wonder what might come out when the walls come down. But I won't be watching to find out. I've accepted a job in another city, as far from Riverside as I could get. My new office is in a modern building, all glass and steel, with no hidden spaces or sealed rooms. Still, I make sure to leave before dark. Some habits are worth keeping. And sometimes when I'm alone in a quiet room, I catch myself listening. Listening for the sound of laughter, for the scrape of furniture, for knocks on doors that should be locked. But mostly, I try not to think about that night on the 14th floor. About what might have happened if I'd opened that conference room door when the handle started to turn. About what I might have seen if I'd stayed just a few seconds longer. Some questions are better left unanswered. Some doors are better left closed. And some rooms, like that conference room on the 14th floor, are better left undisturbed. No matter what sounds come from behind their doors late at night, when you think you're alone in the building. But you're never really alone. Not in places like that, I know that now. The first thud came at 2:47 a.m. I know because I checked my phone thinking it might be the neighbors. But this building was too new to have neighbors. I'd moved in just 2 weeks ago, and so far I was the only tenant on the entire 7th floor. Another thud, followed by what sounded like shuffling footsteps in the hallway. My TV was off. The AC had cycled down. In that artificial silence of a new building, those sounds shouldn't exist. I put down my laptop and stood up from my desk. The footsteps continued, slow and uneven, like someone dragging their feet across the carpet. Then came the voices, muffled, indistinct, but definitely human. At least 2 different ones, speaking in low tones I couldn't make out through the door. The rational part of my brain said it had to be maintenance workers or security doing late-night checks. But at this hour, in a building that was still mostly empty, I walked to my front door and pressed my ear against it. The voices were clearer now, a man and a woman, their words still too garbled to understand. They sounded agitated, speaking in quick, sharp bursts. My hand hovered over the doorknob. I'm not usually the type to investigate strange noises in the middle of the night. I've seen enough horror movies to know better, but this was my floor, my home. I had a right to know what was happening out there. I opened the door as quietly as possible, just a crack at first. The hallway lights were on their usual dim night setting, casting long shadows across the beige carpet. The voices had stopped. Opening the door wider, I stepped into the hallway. Empty. The cream-colored walls stretched in both directions, unmarked by any decorations or signs. The building was too new for those touches. Just a long row of identical dark wood doors, all of them vacant units except mine. The elevator was about 30 feet to my right. Its digital display caught my attention immediately. The numbers were flickering rapidly, jumping between different floors in a way I'd never seen before. As I watched, it settled on 7, my floor, but the light behind the number pulsed erratically, like a fluorescent bulb about to die. I walked toward it slowly. My bare feet made no sound on the new carpet, but I could feel how cold it was through my socks. The air in the hallway was several degrees cooler than my apartment, which didn't make sense since the building's climate control system was supposed to be state-of-the-art. When I got within 10 feet of the elevator, I heard it, a scratching sound coming from behind the metal doors. Not mechanical, this was organic, like fingernails dragging across the surface. I stopped. The display continued to flicker on 7, casting intermittent blue light across the hallway. The scratching got louder, more deliberate. Then a thump from inside the elevator car, heavy enough to make the doors vibrate slightly. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting breaking the silence. My voice sounded too loud, too intrusive in that empty space. The scratching stopped. The thumping stopped. Everything went quiet except for the soft, electrical hum of the hallway lights. I took another step forward. The elevator doors looked normal, brushed stainless steel, pristine and unmarked. But something was wrong with the seam where they met in the middle. Instead of being perfectly straight, it seemed to bulge outward slightly, as if something was pressing against it from the inside. The display flickered again, this time cycling through all the numbers rapidly before going dark completely. In that moment of darkness, I heard the voices again, closer now, coming from inside the elevator car. The woman's voice was clearer. "Please, help us." My heart started pounding. I reached for my phone, then remembered I'd left it in my apartment. The smart thing would be to go back, call building security or the police. But what if someone was actually trapped in there? I stepped closer to the elevator and pressed the call button. Nothing happened. I pressed it again, holding it down longer this time. The display remained dark. The scratching resumed, more frantic now. Multiple sets of fingernails dragging across metal. The doors bulged further outward, the seam between them widening enough that I could see darkness through the gap. "Is someone in there?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "I can call for help." A hand shot through the gap between the doors, pale, dirty, with broken fingernails. It clawed at the air for a moment before gripping the edge of the door, trying to pull it open wider. I stumbled backward. The hand was followed by another, then another. Multiple hands forcing their way through the widening gap, accompanied by the screech of metal being forced apart. The lights in the hallway flickered, and in that strobing effect, I saw faces pressing against the gap. Distorted, wrong somehow, their features twisted in ways that human faces shouldn't move. Their mouths were open too wide, showing too many teeth. I turned and ran. Behind me, I heard the final screech of metal giving way, followed by the wet sound of bodies hitting the carpet. The voices started again, no longer muffled, no longer human. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get my key into the lock. I could hear them coming, the shuffle drag of multiple sets of feet on carpet getting closer. The hallway lights were flickering faster now, casting the scene in broken fragments of visibility. I got the door open and slammed it behind me, turning both deadbolts. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing hard, listening. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. Something scraped against the wood, those same broken fingernails. Then a voice, the woman from before, but different now. Distorted, like someone playing a tape at the wrong speed. "Let us in," it said. "We lived here first." I backed away from the door. That didn't make sense. This building was brand new. The construction had just finished 2 months ago. Before that, it was an empty lot. The scratching moved to my window. I was 7 floors up. There couldn't be anything out there. But when I looked, I saw those hands pressing against the glass, leaving dirty smears. Between the fingers, I caught glimpses of faces, the same twisted expressions I'd seen in the elevator. My phone was still on my desk. I grabbed it and dialed 911, but there was no signal. The Wi-Fi was down too. Even my cellular data wasn't working. The temperature in my apartment dropped suddenly. I could see my breath fogging in the air. The scratching was at both the door and windows now, and other sounds were joining it. Wet, organic noises I didn't want to identify. The woman's voice came again, closer now, as if she was speaking directly through the door. "We died here first." My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. I'd done my research before moving in. This was newly developed land, never built on before. The construction company had broken ground just last year. Unless... I pulled up the building's website on my laptop, thankful I still had the page loaded in my cache. I scrolled through the development history, looking for anything I might have missed. There, in a small note near the bottom, site of the former Westbrook Apartments, demolished 1986 following structural collapse. 27 residents lost. A crack appeared in my window, spreading like a spider web from where one of the hands pressed against it. The door's hinges were starting to bend inward, metal groaning under impossible pressure. I ran to my bedroom, slamming and locking that door too. My hands were numb from the cold. The temperature must have dropped another 20 degrees in the last minute. The outer door finally gave way with a crash. I heard them entering my apartment. The drag of feet, the sound of furniture being knocked over, those wet, shuffling noises getting closer. They were talking now, multiple voices overlapping, all distorted in that same wrong way. Our home. Give it back. We died here. The bedroom door wouldn't hold them for long. I looked around frantically for options. The window? 7 floors up was a fatal drop. The closet? Just another dead end. Something hit the bedroom door hard enough to splinter the wood. Through the cracks I could see them. Fragments of faces, hands, bodies that weren't quite right. Like someone had tried to reconstruct human beings from broken pieces. The door burst inward. They filled the doorway. A mass of twisted limbs and distorted faces, all pressed together like they were still trying to fit in that elevator car. Their skin was pale and mottled, clothes rotted and stained with old blood and concrete dust. The woman who had spoken first was in front, her neck bent at an impossible angle, arms too long for her body. When she smiled, her jaw opened wider than any human mouth should. "Welcome home," she said. I backed up until I hit the window. They moved into the room as one mass, reaching for me with those broken hands. The cold was intense now, burning my lungs with each breath. The woman's hand touched my shoulder. Her skin felt like wet concrete. "Stay with us," she whispered. "Forever." I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I was lying on my desk, my laptop screen dark in front of me. Sunlight was streaming through the windows. My phone showed 8:15 a.m. A dream, just a horrible dream. Then I noticed the temperature display on my thermostat, 42 degrees Fahrenheit. And there, on my shoulder, 5 distinct bruises in the shape of fingerprints, gray like old concrete. I moved out that day, left most of my things behind. The building management didn't argue when I broke my lease. They just looked uncomfortable and processed the paperwork quickly. A month later, I drove past the building. It was empty again, all the windows dark. A sign out front announced, "Luxury apartments, taking applications." As I waited at the red light, I looked up at the 7th floor. For a moment, I thought I saw something in my old window. A pale face, pressed against the glass, smiling too widely. The light turned green. I drove away and never looked back. But sometimes late at night, I still hear those voices. And when I'm in an elevator, I watch the floor numbers carefully, holding my breath until they stop exactly where they're supposed to, because sometimes they don't. Sometimes they flicker. The first time I noticed something was wrong at 2847 Maple Street, I dismissed it. Just another boring foreclosure inspection, I told myself. But now, 3 weeks later, I'm questioning everything I know about reality, and I'm afraid to go back there tomorrow. I've been a real estate agent for 15 years. Foreclosure inspections are routine. Check the property condition, document any damage, make sure it's secure. Usually it's just sad, empty houses with bad memories. This one looked the same at first. A typical 1960s ranch-style home in a declining neighborhood. Tan brick exterior, overgrown yard, storm door with peeling paint. The bank had taken possession after the owners defaulted, and they needed monthly inspection reports. That first visit was completely normal. I used the lockbox key, did my usual walkthrough with my tablet, taking photos and notes. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, dated kitchen with cheap laminate counters. Musty smell from being closed up. All the light switches were down in the off position, which was standard. I always check every switch to make sure the electricity is still on. The white vinyl blinds were all raised up, letting in what sun they could through grimy windows. Nothing unusual. I finished my inspection in about 45 minutes, submitted my report, and didn't think about the house again until my next scheduled visit 4 weeks later. That's when things got strange. Everything looked the same from the outside. I unlocked the front door, stepped in, and immediately noticed something different. A faint floral scent, like women's perfume. Not overwhelming, just a subtle sweetness in the air. I figured maybe the bank had shown it to a potential buyer. But when I checked the lockbox history later, there were no other entries. In the living room, I found the first real discrepancy. I distinctly remembered raising all the blinds during my initial inspection. It's part of my routine to let in natural light. But now 3 of the 4 windows had their blinds fully lowered. I made a note to mention it in my report, assuming someone had been in the house even though the locks were secure. Then I noticed the light switches. In the kitchen, the switch by the door was flipped up instead of down. I was absolutely certain I'd left all switches in the off position. It's a habit ingrained from years of inspections. A safety issue, making sure everything's off when the house is vacant. I started checking all the switches systematically. 4 more were in the up position: dining room, hall, master bedroom, and garage. My pulse quickened as I documented each one. The house was supposed to be empty. The locks hadn't been touched. But someone, or something, had been flipping switches. I finished my inspection as quickly as I could while still being thorough. Just before leaving, I deliberately turned every switch down and raised all the blinds. I took photos to document the positions. I wanted proof for my next visit. That was 2 weeks ago. I had to do an extra inspection because the bank was considering an offer. When I arrived, my stomach dropped. All the blinds I had raised were lowered again. 6 light switches were up. And that perfume smell was stronger. Definitely floral, like jasmine or gardenia. I forced myself to go through the whole house. In the master bathroom, I found something that made my skin crawl. A wet spot on the counter by the sink about the size of a quarter. The water was fresh. I touched it with my finger to be sure. While I was examining it, I heard a sound from somewhere in the house. Like footsteps on carpet, very soft, barely audible. I spun around, heart pounding. "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice sounded thin and shaky. No response, just the hollow echo of an empty house. I practically ran through the rest of my inspection. Every creak of the floor made me jump. The air felt thick and heavy, like someone was watching me. When I finally got out to my car, I sat there for several minutes, hands trembling on the steering wheel. I requested to be taken off the account, told my supervisor I had too many properties already. She said no, we're short-staffed, and this is an important client. I have to go back tomorrow for the monthly inspection. This time I'm bringing backup. Mike, another agent from my office. He thinks I'm being ridiculous, that there must be a logical explanation. Maybe he's right, but I know what I've seen and heard. And I can't shake the feeling that whatever is in that house is getting bolder. I'm sitting in my home office now, looking at the inspection photos on my laptop. The pictures show everything exactly as I described. Blinds up, switches down. Tomorrow we'll see what's changed. Part of me hopes Mike witnesses something too, so I know I'm not crazy. But a bigger part hopes everything is completely normal. My phone just buzzed. A text from Mike confirming tomorrow's inspection at 10 a.m. As I read it, I caught a whiff of something in the air. Something floral, like jasmine. I turned around slowly, expecting... I don't know what. Nothing was there. Just my imagination. Has to be. I close my laptop and try to focus on other work, but my mind keeps drifting back to 2847 Maple Street, to those light switches that keep flipping up when no one's there, to that fresh water on the bathroom counter, to those soft footsteps I heard, or thought I heard. Tomorrow I'll know more. Tomorrow I'll have backup. Tomorrow we'll document everything thoroughly. But right now, in the growing darkness of my office, I'm struggling to find a rational explanation for what's happening in that empty house. The next morning dawns gray and cold. Mike meets me in the office parking lot, travel mug of coffee in hand, looking annoyingly cheerful. "Ready to go ghost hunting?" he jokes, sliding into the passenger seat of my car. "Just help me do a thorough inspection," I say. "And pay attention to anything unusual." The drive takes 20 minutes. I fill Mike in on the details. The perfume smell, the switches, the wet counter, the footsteps. He nods politely, but I can tell he's skeptical. That's fine. I was skeptical too, at first. We park in front of 2847 Maple Street. The house looks exactly the same as always. Boring, ordinary, empty. Dead leaves scatter across the unmowed lawn. The storm door creaks in the wind. Spooky, Mike says with a grin. I ignore him and get the lockbox key. Inside, the first thing I notice is the smell. Stronger than ever, unmistakably floral. Mike notices it too, his smile fading slightly. Perfume, he says. Weird in an empty house. Told you. I start checking the blinds while Mike photographs the rooms. Every single blind is down, even though I distinctly remember raising them 2 weeks ago. The light switches are next. I count them as I go. 1, 2, 3. 12 switches in the up position, more than ever before. Mike, I call out. Come look at this. I show him how many switches are flipped. I turned all these off last time. Took photos to prove it. He frowns. Could be an electrical issue. Old wiring, faulty switches, all turning themselves on at the same time, in different parts of the house. He shrugs, but I can tell he's unsettled. We move through the house methodically, documenting everything. In the master bathroom, the counter is dry this time, but there's something new. A fine layer of dust on everything except a circular, clean spot by the sink, exactly where I saw the water last time. Someone's been here, Mike says quietly. Check the lockbox log, I tell him. He pulls out his phone, checks the digital record. No entry since your last inspection. So how? A loud click interrupts me. We both freeze. What was that? Mike whispers. Sounded like... I swallow hard. Like a light switch. We move cautiously to the hallway. The switch by the bedroom door is now in the up position. I know. It was down when we checked it 5 minutes ago. Mike's face has gone pale. Okay, that's not normal. Another click from the kitchen. We practically run in there. The switch by the door is up. While we stare at it, it clicks down again. By itself. No one touching it. Jesus, Mike breathes. The perfume smell is overwhelming now. The air feels charged, heavy with something invisible but present. The hair on my arm stands up. That's when we hear the footsteps, soft but clear, moving across the living room carpet behind us. We spin around. Nothing there. The footsteps continue to the front door, then stop. We need to go, I say. Now. Mike doesn't argue. We hurry to the door, not running but moving fast. As I reach for the handle, the lock clicks. I try turning it anyway, locked tight. Use your key, Mike says, voice shaking. I fumble with my key ring, find the right key. It won't turn. Like something's holding the lock from the other side. The footsteps start again, moving toward us. The perfume smell is so strong I can barely breathe. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the living room light switch flip up. Mike slams his shoulder into the door. Once, twice, it bursts open. We stumble out into the cold morning air, gasping. Behind us, the storm door slams shut with a crack like a gunshot. We stand there for a long moment, catching our breath, staring at the house. Through the window, I see the living room light switch flip down again. Well, Mike says finally, I guess I owe you an apology. I laugh, but it comes out shaky. Let's get out of here. In the car, we sit in silence for a minute. Then Mike pulls out his tablet. We still need to file the inspection report, he says. What should we put? I start the engine. The truth, all of it. Let the bank figure it out. They'll think we're crazy. Probably, but we have photos, video, 2 witnesses, and we're both experienced agents with good reputations. He nods slowly. Yeah, okay. He starts typing, then pauses. Hey, that perfume smell? Reminded me of something. I looked up the previous owners earlier. It was a foreclosure after the owner died. A widow named Margaret Wilson lived there alone for 20 years after her husband passed. Died in the master bedroom last year. My hands tighten on the steering wheel. Let me guess. She wore floral perfume? According to the estate sale listing, they sold several bottles of vintage jasmine perfume. I pull away from the curb, resisting the urge to drive faster than necessary. In the rearview mirror, 2847 Maple Street grows smaller. Just before it disappears from view, I swear I see one of the blinds raise up just a few inches like someone is peeking out. I file my report that afternoon, documenting everything in detailed professional language. The bank will probably take us off the account, maybe even question our competence. I don't care. I'm done with 2847 Maple Street. But that night, sitting in my home office again, I find myself scrolling through photos of the house. Something catches my eye in one of the living room shots, a faint blur in the corner like a human figure. I zoom in, trying to make it clearer. Suddenly, my desk lamp flicks off. A familiar floral scent drifts through the air. I close my laptop, grab my keys, and leave. I'll work from the office tomorrow. Some cases I'm learning are better left to someone else. Let the bank send another agent. I'm sure Margaret will find creative ways to make them feel welcome. As I drive away, I check my rearview mirror out of habit. For a moment, I think I see something in the back seat, a blur, a shadow, a hint of movement. But when I look again, it's gone. Just my imagination. Has to be. Right? I shouldn't have gone camping alone. That's what everyone keeps telling me now. The police, the park rangers, even the UFO researchers who won't stop calling. But I need to get this down while it's still fresh. While I can still remember every detail of those 12 hours that changed everything I thought I knew about our place in the universe. It started as a regular weekend trip to Black Rock State Forest. I'd done solo camping dozens of times before, pack the essentials, drive out Friday after work, spend Saturday hiking, head home Sunday morning. Simple, safe, normal. October 12th seemed like any other fall weekend. Crisp air, leaves turning, perfect camping weather. I pulled into my usual spot around 7 p.m. just as the sun was setting. It's a secluded clearing about 2 miles from the main campground, accessible by a narrow dirt road. I'd found it 3 years ago and kept coming back. The rangers knew me and my Toyota 4Runner by now. Going to your secret spot again, Mark? They'd joke at the check-in station. I liked the solitude, the quiet. No RVs, no loud families, no college kids with their music. Just me, my tent, and the woods. Setup was routine. I've done it so many times I could probably pitch that tent blindfolded. Coleman 2-person dome tent, though I only need half the space. Ground tarp down first, stakes in solid. Rain fly secured, just in case. I had the whole camp ready in 20 minutes. Tent, camp chair, small fire pit. The temperature was dropping fast as night fell, so I got a fire going right away. Nothing big, just enough to cook dinner and keep warm. I heated up some chili I'd brought from home, ate it straight from the pot with a plastic spoon while I watched the stars come out. The sky was incredibly clear that night. No moon, no clouds, just an endless field of stars scattered across the darkness. I could see the Milky Way stretching overhead, something you never get in the city. The first strange thing I noticed was around 10 p.m. I was about to bank the fire and turn in when I saw what looked like a satellite moving across the sky. Except it wasn't moving in a straight line like satellites do. This light zigzagged, making sharp turns that should have been impossible for anything in orbit. I figured it must be a drone, though I'd never seen one flying that high or that fast. Then the light stopped dead in the middle of the sky. Just froze there, perfectly still, glowing with a steady white-blue color. I grabbed my phone to record it, but the battery was already at 15% despite being fully charged when I arrived. I only managed a few seconds of shaky footage before the phone died completely. The light hung there for maybe 30 seconds, then suddenly split into 3 identical points arranged in a triangle. They rotated slowly like they were scanning the ground below. I felt the hair on my arms stand up. The air had changed. There was a low humming sound just at the edge of hearing, more like pressure than noise. Static electricity made my skin tingle. I'm not proud to admit it, but I dove into my tent, zipped it up tight, and lay there in my sleeping bag, heart pounding. The humming got louder, and a bright blue-white light flooded through the tent walls. It was so bright I could see every detail inside the tent like it was noon on a summer day. The light pulsed rhythmically, and I could feel vibrations coming up through the ground. I don't know how long I lay there, barely breathing, while that light swept back and forth across my campsite. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. Time felt wrong somehow, stretched out and compressed at the same time. Eventually, the humming faded and the light dimmed. When I finally worked up the courage to unzip the tent and peek out, the sky was dark and normal again. I didn't sleep. How could I? I sat up all night in that tent, jumping at every sound, every snapping twig or rustling leaf. My phone was dead. My flashlight batteries were dead too, though they'd been brand new. Even my watch had stopped at 10:07 p.m. The only light came from the dying embers of my fire, which I was too scared to leave the tent to rebuild. Dawn seemed to take forever to arrive. When the sky finally started to lighten, I burst out of that tent like a sprinter at the starting gun. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Complete, absolute silence. No birds, no insects, no wind in the trees, just dead silence. Then I saw the circles. 3 perfect circles burned into the ground about 50 feet from my tent, each one exactly 30 feet in diameter. The grass inside the circles wasn't just burned, it was gone, replaced by glass smooth black material that looked like obsidian but felt warm to the touch. The circles overlapped slightly, forming a pattern like a Venn diagram. In the center, where all 3 circles intersected, there was a small raised pyramid of the same black material, about 6 inches high. My hands were shaking as I took pictures with my phone, which had mysteriously started working again but showed the wrong date, October 14th instead of 13th. That's when I noticed the other changes. The temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees overnight. There was frost on my tent even though the weather forecast had predicted lows in the mid-50s. And most worrying of all, my car wouldn't start. The 4Runner's battery was completely dead. Not just weak, dead. When I hooked up my portable jump starter, nothing happened. The electrical system was fried. No lights, no radio, not even a click from the starter. I popped the hood and found scorch marks on the engine block, radiating out from all the electrical connections like lightning burns. I tried calling for help, but my phone showed no signal despite usually having decent coverage at that spot. The GPS app wouldn't load. Even the compass app just spun in circles, unable to find north. I was effectively cut off. That's when I heard it, a low, pulsing hum coming from the direction of the circles. The black material was vibrating, sending ripples across its surface like water. The small pyramid in the center began to glow with a faint blue light, the same color I'd seen in the sky the night before. I grabbed my backpack and stuffed it with water, food, and warm clothes. Whatever was happening, I wasn't sticking around to find out more. I knew there was a ranger station about 5 miles away if I followed the main trail. I could make that in a couple of hours, even loaded down with gear. I didn't even bother breaking down the tent, just grabbed the essentials and started walking, fast. The humming followed me for the first mile, growing fainter with distance but never completely fading. My watch had started working again but was running backward, the hands spinning counterclockwise at high speed. The forest felt wrong as I walked. The trees seemed taller somehow, their shadows too dark and sharp even in the morning light. I kept seeing movement at the corners of my vision, but whenever I turned to look, there was nothing there. The air felt thick, like walking through invisible syrup. And it was cold, much colder than it should have been for October in this part of the country. I made it about 3 miles before I had to stop and rest. My legs felt like lead, and I was breathing way too hard for the relatively easy terrain. That's when I noticed the first mark on my arm, a perfect circle about the size of a quarter, raised and red like a brand but ice cold to the touch. As I watched, 2 more identical marks appeared next to it, forming the same triangle pattern I'd seen in the sky. I ran, dropped my pack and ran like hell through those woods, branches whipping my face, roots trying to trip me with every step. The marks on my arm were spreading, multiplying in geometric patterns down to my wrist and up past my elbow. Each new circle brought a wave of cold that seemed to sink right into my bones. I don't remember much about the last mile to the ranger station. My vision was blurry, my thoughts scattered. I remember the ground seeming to ripple under my feet like waves on water. Remember the trees bending away from me as I passed, their branches twisting into impossible shapes. Remember the sky turning that same bright blue-white color I'd seen the night before, though my phone's camera showed normal blue when I tried to photograph it. I burst into the ranger station at 9:43 a.m., according to their wall clock. The rangers said I was screaming about lights and circles, though I don't remember that part. They said my body temperature was 83 degrees when they checked it, way too low for someone who'd just been running. The marks on my arm were gone by then, leaving no trace they'd ever existed. The rangers sent a team to my campsite. They found my tent and car right where I'd left them, but no signs of the circles. The ground was undisturbed. The car's battery was fine. It started right up for them. They showed me photos. Everything looked completely normal. But it wasn't normal. Nothing has been normal since that night. The date thing on my phone wasn't a glitch. I lost a day somehow. It was October 14th when I reached the ranger station, not the 13th like it should have been. 24 hours just gone with no memory of what happened during that time. The rangers' logs show I checked in on the 12th, but nothing after that until I showed up at their station on the 14th. My watch still runs backward sometimes, especially at night. The compass on my phone spins wildly whenever I'm in the woods. I can't keep batteries charged. They drain in hours no matter what device they're in. And sometimes, usually around 10:07 p.m., I hear that humming again. Feel that static electricity on my skin. See flashes of blue-white light at the edges of my vision. The UFO researchers say my experience matches dozens of other reports from that area over the past 50 years. They've shown me photos of similar circle patterns found in fields and forests across the country. They want me to speak at their conferences, tell my story to their followers. The doctors say I experienced a combination of hypothermia and stress-induced hallucinations. They've run tests, taken scans, drawn blood. Everything comes back normal except my body temperature, which still runs about 5 degrees below average. They've prescribed anti-anxiety medications and recommended therapy. The police filed a report but didn't investigate further. No crime was committed. No property was damaged. No one was hurt. Just another weird story from the woods. But I know what I saw, what I felt. What happened to me out there was real, whatever it was. The marks on my arm may be gone, but I can still feel them sometimes. 3 cold circles forming a perfect triangle, pulsing in time with that distant humming that never completely goes away. I haven't been camping since that night. Haven't even been able to stay outdoors after dark. The stars don't look the same to me anymore. When I look up at that vast field of lights, I can't shake the feeling that something up there is looking back. Watching. Waiting. My tent and sleeping bag are still in the garage, gathering dust. Sometimes I think about burning them, erasing every reminder of that night. But I keep them as evidence, proof that I'm not crazy, that it really happened. The rangers say that clearing is still there, still accessible by that narrow dirt road. Still empty and quiet, waiting for the next camper looking for solitude. I wonder if they'll see the lights too, if they'll find the circles, if they'll lose a day like I did. I wonder if they'll believe what they see, or if they'll convince themselves it was all in their head, like everyone wants me to do, like I've tried and failed to do every day since it happened. Because the hardest part isn't the memories or the lingering effects or even the fear. The hardest part is knowing that something impossible happened to me out there in those woods, something that changed me in ways I still don't understand, and I'll never know exactly what it was or why it chose me. All I know for sure is that I'm not the same person who pitched that tent on October 12th. That person believed he understood how the world worked, believed in rational explanations and natural laws, believed he was alone in that clearing. Now I know better. Now I know we're never really alone out there. And sometimes when the stars are bright and that humming starts up again, I catch myself watching the sky. Not with fear anymore, but with anticipation. Waiting to see those lights again. Waiting for answers to questions I'm not even sure how to ask. But mostly waiting to find out what those 12 missing hours cost me. What part of myself I left behind in those 3 perfect circles. And what, if anything took its place. I found the photograph at the bottom of a cardboard box marked Kitchen 2019. It was wedged between my old coffee maker and some chipped mugs. That was impossible. I'd packed that box myself 3 years ago, and I'd never seen this photo before in my life. But the faces staring back at me made my stomach drop. The picture showed a family of 4 standing in front of a red brick house. The father wore a brown leather jacket that looked exactly like the one hanging in my closet at home. The mother had long, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, just like Sarah used to wear hers before the divorce. The 2 kids, a boy and a girl, looked around 8 and 6. Deep scratches ran across their faces, like someone had tried to erase them. I sat down hard on the concrete floor of my storage unit, ignoring the dust and grime. Unit 247 had been my dumping ground for the past 5 years, ever since Sarah and I split up, and I had to downsize to a 1-bedroom apartment. Now the facility was being demolished for condos, and I had 48 hours to clear everything out. The temperature was dropping as evening approached. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the rows of identical rolling doors. I'd been here since morning, sorting through boxes, making piles for donation and trash. That's when I started noticing things that didn't belong to me. At first, it was small stuff. A brass desk lamp I didn't recognize. Some old hardcover books I'd never bought. I figured maybe they'd gotten mixed in when I was moving, or Sarah had packed some random items. But then I found the camping gear, a full set of expensive equipment still in its original packaging. I'd never been camping in my life. The photo trembled in my hands. The father had my exact hairline, my nose, even the small scar above his right eyebrow. But his eyes were wrong, flat and dark, like holes punched in paper. The mother could have been Sarah's twin, except for the unnatural angle of her neck and the way her smile stretched too wide across her face. My phone buzzed, making me jump. A text from Mike, my brother. "You need help clearing out the unit? Can come by after work." I started to type yes, then deleted it. Something told me I needed to figure this out alone. I texted back, "All good, almost done. Thanks though." Standing up, I did a slow turn around the tank's 15 space. I thought I knew every item in here. Memories and junk from 15 years of adult life. Now I really looked at the stacks of boxes and furniture. A green armchair I'd never owned sat in the corner. The brass numbers on the antique clock on the wall were backwards. And the mirror. When had I gotten a full-length mirror with that ornate silver frame? I walked over to it, feet crunching on scattered packing peanuts. My reflection looked normal enough. 42 years old, graying at the temples, wearing my old Yankees t-shirt and jeans dusty from moving boxes. I reached out to touch the cool glass surface. The reflection didn't move. I yanked my hand back. In the mirror, my image remained perfectly still, arm outstretched, fingertips pressed against the other side of the glass. As I watched, it smiled, a wrong, twisted smile that split its face like a crack. I stumbled backwards, knocking over a stack of boxes. Papers and old clothes spilled across the floor. Among them was another photograph, this one showing the same family standing in front of my storage unit, Unit 247. They were all smiling, those horrible smiles. The date stamp in the corner read 06/15/2024, 6 months from now. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick up my phone. I needed to call someone. The police? A psychiatrist? Sarah? What would I even say? The fluorescent light above me flickered and went out. In the dim glow from the remaining lights, I saw movement in the mirror. The reflection family was there now, standing behind mirror me, still smiling. The father raised his hand in a wave. I ran, slammed the rolling door down and fumbled with the padlock. Behind me, something scratched against the metal door. I dropped the keys twice before managing to lock it. The long hallway of storage units stretched out in both directions, identical doors disappearing into shadow. I couldn't remember which way led to the exit. My breath came in short gasps that echoed off the concrete walls. A door rattled somewhere in the darkness. Then another. And another. The sound of rolling metal grew louder, closer, like a wave of doors opening and closing. I picked a direction and ran. The emergency exit sign glowed red at the end of the hall. Or was it just another reflection? The rattling followed me, along with a new sound. Footsteps, out of sync with my own. And whispers, too quiet to make out the words. I slammed through the emergency exit into the parking lot. The sun had set while I was inside. My car sat alone under a flickering lamppost. I fumbled for my keys, pressing the unlock button repeatedly. The car chirped. In the brief flash of the headlights, I saw them. 4 figures standing at the edge of the parking lot. A family. My family. But wrong. I dove into the driver's seat and locked the doors. The engine roared to life. As I peeled out of the parking lot, I glimpsed them in my rearview mirror. They stood in a perfect line, waving goodbye with those twisted smiles. The father wore my leather jacket. That was 3 days ago. I haven't been back to the storage facility. Haven't been back to my apartment either. I've been driving, staying in cheap motels, paying cash. Every mirror I pass shows me something different now. Every photograph I look at changes when I look away. This morning I found another picture in my wallet. I know I've never seen it before, but it was tucked behind my driver's license like it had always been there. It shows me, the real me, standing with that family in front of Unit 247. We're all smiling those wrong smiles. The date stamp says 06/16/2024. Tomorrow. I could run, drive until I run out of gas, then keep going on foot. But I know that won't work. They're in every reflection now, getting closer. Waiting. I'm writing this all down because I need someone to know what happened. Need someone to understand why I have to go back to Unit 247. They're waiting for me there. My family. The family I never had. The family I might have had, in some other version of my life. The family I'm about to become. I keep checking my smile in the rearview mirror. It looks normal. For now. But sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I catch it starting to stretch. I should have known something was wrong the moment I found that first photograph. Should have walked away, called the police, done something different. But now it's too late. The changes are spreading. This morning I found a brown leather jacket in my back seat, the exact one from the photo. When I reached back to touch it, it was warm. The storage facility office called an hour ago. A woman's voice, familiar but wrong, like Sarah's voice played backwards. Just reminding you that all units must be cleared out by tomorrow. Unit 247 still has some items inside. Your family's waiting to help you move them. I hung up, threw my phone out the window, but I can still hear her voice in my head, getting louder. They're all getting louder now, whispering about tomorrow, about Unit 247, about becoming. The sun is setting. I'm parked outside a gas station somewhere in New Jersey, watching my reflection in the window. It's still me mostly, but if I look closely, I can see them standing behind me, getting clearer, more solid. Their smiles are my smile now. I'm going back to Unit 247. I don't have a choice anymore. They're calling me home. If you're reading this, don't look for me. Don't try to find Unit 247. And whatever you do, don't trust the reflections. They're not reflections anymore, they're doors. And they're opening. I have to go now. It's almost dark, and they're waiting. My family is waiting. I'm starting to smile. The VHS tape sat on my coffee table, its black plastic case collecting dust in the late afternoon light. No label, no writing. Just another random item from the dozens of boxes my mom had asked me to clear out of her basement. I hadn't owned a VCR in years, but I'd kept the old one from high school in a closet. Guess some part of me knew this day would come. I pulled the VCR from the back of my hall closet, brushed off the dust and connected it to my TV with the red, white, and yellow cables I'd found tangled in the same box. The machine made a grinding sound when I plugged it in. The digital display flickered to life. 12th hour, 12th hour, 12th hour. My hands were sweating as I pushed the tape in. The mechanism grabbed it with a mechanical whir. Static filled the screen, then that deep blue background that screamed, "Home Video." The timestamp in the corner read 06:15 to 1989. I was 7 years old then. The image stabilized, showing our old backyard in New Jersey. The red swing set my dad built, the above-ground pool with its faded blue liner. But something was wrong. There I was, running across the yard in my Ninja Turtles t-shirt, but behind me, a dark shape moved. Not my shadow. The sun was directly overhead in the video. This was something else. A black mass that followed my movements, staying about 3 feet behind me at all times. I leaned closer to the TV, my throat tight. I didn't remember this day. Not the swing set, not playing in the yard, and I definitely didn't remember that shape. The video jumped, typical of old home recordings, and now showed me sitting at our kitchen table. Birthday cake, 8 candles. This must have been the next year, 1990. My mom was there, younger, her hair still dark brown. Dad filming, obviously. My little sister Tracy in her high chair, face already smeared with frosting. And there it was again. The shadow, standing behind my chair. Taller than before, but still roughly matching my proportions. The edges of it were fuzzy, undefined. As I watched, it seemed to pulse slightly, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. My chest felt tight. I hit pause, got up, and walked to the kitchen. My hands shook as I poured a glass of water. I drained it in 3 gulps, then gripped the edge of the counter until my knuckles went white. I didn't remember that birthday party either. Back in the living room, I hit play again. More birthdays, family picnics, Christmas mornings. Years of my childhood played out in grainy video quality, and in every single frame that shadow stayed with me. Growing as I grew, always just behind me, just over my shoulder. None of my family members seemed to notice it. They never glanced at it, never reacted when it moved. In one scene, my mom walked right through it while bringing out a plate of hamburgers at a backyard barbecue. I fast-forwarded through several minutes of static, and the next clear image made my stomach lurch. My 10th birthday party at Pizza Hut. I remembered this one. It was the first memory I could actually place. Red plastic booth, paper plates, those cheap cardboard party hats. My friends from elementary school singing off-key around the table, but the shadow was gone. Every video after that point showed me normally. No dark shape, no mysterious presence. Just regular home movies of a regular kid growing up in suburban New Jersey. I rewound to the Pizza Hut scene and watched it again, frame by frame. The moment when I blew out the candles. There was something. A flicker of darkness at the edge of the frame. Then nothing. My phone buzzed, making me jump. A text from my mom. "Find anything interesting in those boxes?" I stared at the message for a long time. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. Finally, I typed, "Mom, who usually did the filming when we were kids?" The 3 dots appeared immediately. "Your father, mostly. You know how he was with that camera. Why?" I hesitated again. Did we have a birthday party for me at Pizza Hut when I turned 10? This time the pause was longer. "Yes, but you got sick, remember? High fever that morning. Almost had to cancel. You were so stubborn about still having the party. Kept saying you weren't going to let it win. We thought you were just delirious from the fever." My hands went cold. I did remember the fever. 3 days in bed, oscillating between burning up and freezing. Dreams of something dark and close, hovering over me, seeping into my skin. I texted back, "Find any old photo albums when you were cleaning?" Check the box marked Photos 8595. Should be in there somewhere. I dug through the pile of boxes until I found it. The cardboard was soft with age. The marker faded. Inside, dozens of photo albums with sticky plastic pages. I grabbed the one labeled 1989 and started flipping. The photos matched the videos. Every single shot of me before age 10 showed that shadow. Sometimes it was more defined, almost human-shaped. Sometimes it was just a dark blur, but it was always there, always following. My fingers trembled as I turned the pages. I called my mom. "Hey, sweetie, getting nostalgic going through all that stuff?" "Mom, I need you to be honest with me. Was I different before I got sick that time? Before the Pizza Hut birthday?" The silence on the other end stretched out. When she spoke again, her voice was careful. "What do you mean different? Did I do things you couldn't explain? Say things that didn't make sense? Did I ever talk about someone or something being with me?" Another long pause. "Why are you asking about this now?" "Please, Mom, I need to know." She sighed. "You were an unusual child, very intelligent, but you had what the doctors called an active imagination. You talked to yourself constantly, claimed you had a friend that no one else could see. We thought it was normal at first. Lots of kids have imaginary friends. But yours seemed different." My mouth was dry. "Different how?" "You said it was always with you, that it had been with you since you were born, that it was teaching you things." She paused again. "You used to tell us it was showing you places, other worlds. You'd describe these incredible scenes, these impossible things. We took you to child psychiatrists, but they all said the same thing, that you'd grow out of it. And you did after that fever. You stopped talking about your friend. Stopped talking to yourself. Became a normal little boy overnight." I looked at the TV screen, paused on that last frame at Pizza Hut, the dark flicker at the edge. "Do you remember what I called it? This friend? You never gave it a name. You just called it my shadow." My hand holding the phone was slick with sweat. "Mom, I need you to think carefully. In all the photos and videos from when I was little, did you ever notice anything strange? Anything in the background?" "What? No, of course not. They're just normal family photos." She paused. "Alex, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "Nothing," I said quickly. "Just remembering things. Hey, I should go. Need to finish sorting through these boxes." "Alex." I hung up, turned back to the TV, rewound the tape to the beginning. This time I watched more carefully. In that first scene, in the backyard, I wasn't just running. I was running with my arms out, like an airplane. But my head was turned to the side, my mouth moving, talking to the shadow. I switched to another scene. Christmas morning, probably age 6. As I opened presents, I kept holding them up, showing them to something over my shoulder. The shadow pulsed and shifted with each movement. Scene after scene. Birthday parties where I saved a piece of cake, setting it aside on an empty chair. Playing with toys, but always leaving space for something else to sit. Having animated conversations with empty air, or what looked like empty air on camera. The fever hadn't cured me of an overactive imagination. It had taken something from me, or maybe something had left. I fast-forwarded through more static, and a new scene appeared. One I hadn't watched yet. Me in a hospital bed, age 10, pale and thin, dark circles under my eyes. The shadow was there, larger than ever, filling the entire corner of the room. The camera was shaky. Dad must have been filming quickly, probably against hospital rules. The timestamp showed 3 a.m. In the video, I was sitting up in bed, talking. The audio was poor, mostly static, but I could make out words. Time to go, can't stay, thank you for... The shadow seemed to pulse, growing larger, darker. Small tendrils of blackness reached toward my bed. Then the picture went black. Not static, pure black. When the image returned, the room was empty except for me, sleeping peacefully in the hospital bed. The timestamp showed 7 a.m. I sat there in my living room as the tape ended, rewound automatically. The mechanical clicking of the VCR seemed very loud in the silence. My phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. Found something else while cleaning. A drawing you did in kindergarten. Your teacher sent it home with a note. I kept it all these years. Coming over to show you. 20 minutes later, she was at my door. She looked pale as she handed me a piece of yellowed construction paper, a child's drawing. crude stick figures, one small labeled ME in wobbly letters. Behind it, a larger figure, done entirely in black crayon, pressed so hard the paper had nearly torn. The teacher's note was stapled to the back. "Mrs. Henderson, I thought you should see this." When I asked Alex about his drawing, he said it was his special friend who shows him things no one else can see. He said it's been with him since he was born, helping him learn about the other side. When I asked what other side, he said, where we all came from, where we go back to. I recommend discussing this with his pediatrician. "Mrs. Walsh." My mom touched my arm. "Alex, what's wrong? You're shaking." I looked at her, then at the TV, then back at the drawing. "Mom, I need you to watch something." But when I tried to play the tape again, the screen showed only static. I rewound it, fast-forwarded, ejected, and reinserted it. Nothing but snow. I pulled the photo albums out again, flipping frantically through the pages. All the photos were still there, but the shadow was gone. Just normal pictures of a normal kid. My mom watched me with growing concern. "Alex, you're starting to scare me. What's going on?" I held up the drawing, pointed to the black figure. "Do you remember? Do you remember what it taught me?" She shook her head slowly. "You never told us. You said it was secret, that you weren't supposed to share what you learned until it was time. And after I got sick, did I ever mention it again? No, it was like you forgot everything. When we tried to ask, you just looked confused. The doctors said it was normal, that high fevers can sometimes cause temporary memory loss. We were just happy to have you back to normal." I stared at the drawing, at the black figure pressed so hard into the paper. "But I didn't forget," I whispered. "It left. It finished teaching me whatever it needed to teach me, and it left." My mom took the drawing from my hand, set it on the coffee table. Maybe that's all it was supposed to do. I looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" She sat down heavily on my couch. "The night your fever broke, I was there in the hospital room. You were talking in your sleep. You said, 'Thank you for showing me. I understand now.' Then your temperature dropped back to normal. When you woke up the next morning," she spread her hands, "you were different. Calmer, more focused, like something that had been pulling you in two directions had finally let go." I picked up the drawing again. The black figure seemed to pulse under my fingers like it had in the videos. Or maybe that was just my hands shaking. "Mom," I said slowly, "what if it wasn't an imaginary friend? What if something really was teaching me, showing me things? What kinds of things?" I pressed my fingers to my temples, tried to remember. I can't. But there was something, a feeling, like words on the tip of my tongue, like a door in my mind, locked but not sealed. Behind it, shadows moved. My mom stood up. "Maybe some things are better left in the past." But as she turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of something in my peripheral vision, a darkness at the edge of my sight. When I turned my head, it was gone. That night, I dreamed of shadows, of other worlds, of things I'd been shown but made to forget until I was ready. And in the morning, when I looked in the mirror, I thought I saw something shift behind my reflection. Just for a moment. Just a flicker of darkness. I should have been terrified, should have run screaming from my own home, but instead I felt recognition, like seeing an old friend after many years, like remembering something I'd always known but had temporarily misplaced. The shadow had taught me things when I was young, things about the other side, about where we come from, where we return to. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to remember. I picked up my phone to call my mom, to tell her everything that was coming back to me. But when I reached for it, my hand passed through a patch of darkness that hadn't been there before. The shadow was back, and this time, I was ready to learn. I didn't expect to end up at the Starlight Motel that night. The neon sign buzzed with half its letters burned out, casting a sickly red glow across the empty parking lot. My Ford had broken down 10 miles outside of Millbrook, Arizona, and this was the only place within walking distance. The night clerk barely looked up from his phone when I walked in, just pushed a registration card across the scratched counter and muttered, $40. Room 214 smelled like stale cigarettes and cheap air freshener. The carpet was worn thin, revealing concrete underneath in patches near the bathroom door. A single queen bed took up most of the space, its brown bedspread decorated with cigarette burns. The TV was an old tube model bolted to a metal bracket on the wall. I locked the door, both the regular lock and the chain, as soon as I got inside. Force of habit from too many nights in places like this. The bathroom light flickered when I flipped the switch, revealing rust stains in the bathtub and a cracked mirror above the sink. I splashed some water on my face and stared at my reflection. 2 days of stubble, bloodshot eyes, wrinkled shirt. I looked exactly like the kind of guy who ends up in a place like this at midnight on a Tuesday. The bed creaked when I lay down, still fully dressed except for my shoes. I kept my wallet in my pocket and my phone on the nightstand, screen facing up so the light would wake me if anyone called. The ceiling fan spun in lazy circles, making a clicking sound every fourth rotation. Sleep came in fits and starts. The walls were thin enough that I could hear the couple arguing 2 doors down, the rumble of trucks on the highway, the ice machine grinding in the hallway. I dozed off sometime after 2 a.m. when the argument finally died down. The sound of metal scraping against metal jerked me awake. In the darkness, I heard the distinct click of a key turning in the lock of my door. My heart slammed against my ribs. I lay completely still, eyes fixed on the strip of light under the door. A shadow moved across it. The lock mechanism turned with a heavy click. I rolled off the bed as quietly as I could, crouching on the floor between the bed and the wall. My phone was still on the nightstand. The door handle began to turn. The chain caught with a sharp clank. Through the 3-inch gap, I saw a slice of hallway light and something moving in the shadows. The door pushed against the chain again, harder this time. The metal links stretched tight. "Wrong room," I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. My hands were trembling. Sweat ran down my back. No response. Just another push against the chain. I lunged for my phone, fumbling to dial 911. The screen was black. Dead. I knew I'd charged it before lying down. I jabbed the power button repeatedly. Nothing. The pushing stopped. Footsteps moved away from the door, growing fainter down the hallway. I stayed frozen in place, listening to my own ragged breathing in the darkness. Minutes passed. Maybe an hour. I didn't move from my spot between the bed and wall. Every sound, the ice machine, doors closing, cars passing, made my muscles tense. When gray light finally started seeping through the threadbare curtains, I stood on shaky legs. My back ached from crouching for so long. I checked my phone again. Still dead. I approached the door slowly. The chain hung loose, swinging slightly. The deadbolt was unlocked. I know I locked it. I always lock it. It's the first thing I do in any motel room. But there it was, turned to the unlocked position. I pressed my ear against the door. The hallway was silent. Moving as quietly as possible, I turned the handle and opened the door a crack. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, illuminating the empty corridor. The worn carpet stretched in both directions, identical numbered doors on either side. I grabbed my shoes and wallet, not bothering with the rest of my stuff. The hall was clear. I walked quickly toward the lobby, looking straight ahead, fighting the urge to run. The morning clerk was different from the night guy, an older woman with gray hair and reading glasses hung on a chain around her neck. She barely glanced up from her crossword puzzle when I approached the desk. "Everything okay with your room, sir?" she asked in a bored tone. "Someone tried to get into my room last night," I said. "They had a key." She looked up then, frowning slightly. "That's not possible. We only make one key per room, and you had yours." "I'm telling you, someone tried to unlock my door at 3 a.m. The deadbolt was unlocked this morning." "Sir, all our keys are accounted for. Maybe you forgot to lock it?" "I didn't forget." My voice rose. I forced myself to take a deep breath. Look, can you just check if anyone else was issued a key to room 214? She sighed and turned to her computer, typing slowly with 2 fingers. No other keys issued, and the electronic log shows no entries after you checked in at 11:47 p.m. Electronic log. All our keys are electronic now. Every time one is used, it's recorded in the system. She turned the monitor toward me. A simple spreadsheet showed room numbers and timestamps. The last entry for 214 was indeed my check-in. That's impossible. I heard someone try to unlock my door. The deadbolt was turned. She shrugged. System doesn't lie, sir. Will you be checking out now? My hands were shaking again as I signed the receipt. I walked quickly to my car, scanning the nearly empty parking lot as I went. An old Buick, a pickup truck, and a minivan were the only other vehicles there. The Ford started on the first try. Of course it did. I pulled out of the lot without looking back at room 214. 20 minutes later, I stopped at a diner just outside of Millbrook. My phone came back to life as soon as I plugged it into the car charger. No missed calls, no texts, battery at 100%. I sat in a booth by the window, ordered coffee I didn't really want, and opened the browser on my phone. The Starlight Motel had exactly 2 reviews online, both from over a year ago. Clean enough, cheap, and okay for one night if you're desperate. Nothing about mysterious keys or unlocked doors. Nothing about electronics failing or deadbolts turning themselves. Just another rundown motel by the highway. The waitress brought my coffee. You okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a smile. Long night, bad sleep. She nodded sympathetically and moved on to the next table. I stared into the black coffee, watching steam rise in the fluorescent light. The same kind of lights as the motel hallway. My hands were steady now, but a cold weight sat in my stomach. I knew what I'd heard. I knew I'd locked that door. And I knew the electronic log had to be wrong, because someone, or something, had tried to get into room 214 at 3 a.m. I paid for the untouched coffee and got back on the highway. The morning sun was bright, making me squint. In my rearview mirror, I could just make out the faded sign of the Starlight Motel, growing smaller as I drove west. 3 days later, I was back home in Nevada, trying to convince myself it had all been some kind of waking dream brought on by exhaustion. I almost had myself believing it until I got the call. It was the Millbrook Police Department. They wanted to know if I'd noticed anything unusual during my stay at the Starlight Motel. Specifically, if I'd heard any disturbances in the middle of the night. Someone tried to get into my room, I said. Around 3 a.m., they had a key. A long pause on the other end. Sir, what room were you in? 214. Another pause. And you're sure about the time? 3 a.m.? Yes, why? What happened? The detective's voice was carefully neutral. The occupant of room 216 was found deceased yesterday morning. Time of death is estimated around 3:15 a.m. on the night you were there. The door was locked from the inside, deadbolt engaged. No signs of forced entry. My mouth went dry. How did they die? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details of an ongoing investigation. But if you think of anything else from that night, please call us immediately. I hung up and sat in my kitchen, staring at nothing. The cold weight in my stomach was back. I opened my laptop and searched for news from Millbrook. The story was there, buried on page 3 of the local paper's website. Local man found dead in motel room. No details about cause of death. No mention of locked doors or mysterious keys. I clicked through to the paper's archive, searching for similar stories. It took hours, but I found them. 3 deaths at the Starlight Motel in the past 5 years. All in locked rooms. All discovered the morning after. And all in room 216. My room had been 214. I thought about the footsteps I'd heard that night, moving away from my door, moving down the hallway, toward room 216. The cold weight spread from my stomach to my chest. I closed the laptop and walked to my liquor cabinet. My hands were shaking again as I poured 3 fingers of whiskey. The detective had said there were no signs of forced entry. The door had been locked from the inside, just like my deadbolt had been mysteriously unlocked. I drained the whiskey in one swallow. The burn in my throat felt real, tangible. Unlike the memory of that night, which was starting to feel like a bad dream again. But I knew it wasn't a dream. Just like I knew I'd locked that door. Just like I knew someone, something, had tried to get into my room at 3 a.m. I poured another drink and opened my laptop again. This time I searched for the history of the Starlight Motel. It had been built in 1963, renovated in 1989, and again in 2018 when the current owners installed the electronic key system. The renovation article mentioned they'd replaced all the old locks, all except one door that wouldn't accept the new system, the door to room 216. My phone rang, making me jump. Unknown number. Hello? Sir, this is Detective Morrison again. One more question about your stay at the Starlight. You said someone tried to get into your room with a key. Yes. Did you actually see anyone? I thought about the shadow I'd seen through the gap in the door. Had it been a person's shadow? I wasn't sure anymore. No, I said. I just heard the key in the lock. And you're certain you locked the deadbolt? Yes. But it was unlocked in the morning? Yes. A long silence. Then, sir, we just reviewed the security footage from that night. The hallway camera shows no one approaching your door between midnight and 6 a.m. The whiskey turned sour in my stomach. That's impossible. I heard them. The deadbolt was unlocked. There's more, he said. We checked the electronic key logs again. There was an attempted entry to your room at exactly 3:02 a.m., but it wasn't with a key. What do you mean? The system logged it as a master key override. The kind only used by maintenance, except what? The motel doesn't have any master keys. They were all destroyed in 2018 when the new system was installed. I sat in silence, processing this. One more thing, the detective said. The time of death in room 216 has been confirmed. 3:15 a.m., exactly 13 minutes after the logged attempt to enter your room. I hung up without responding. My hands were steady as I poured a third drink, but the rest of me was shaking. I thought about that night again, the key turning in the lock, the shadow in the gap, the footsteps moving away, toward room 216, 13 minutes. I opened my laptop one last time and booked a flight to Phoenix. I needed to see the Starlight Motel again, needed to look at room 214 and room 216 in the daylight, but mostly I needed to know what would have happened if that chain hadn't caught, if whatever had tried to enter my room had gotten in. The flight was in 6 hours. I poured another drink and watched the sun set through my kitchen window. In the gathering darkness, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. Metal scraping against metal, like a key turning in a lock. I turned slowly toward my front door. The deadbolt was locked. I knew it was locked, but as I watched, it began to turn. The first time I noticed it was on a Tuesday at 2:17 p.m. I remember the exact time because I checked my phone right after. I was running late to a budget meeting on the 8th floor, and I took that old maintenance stairwell to avoid the crowded elevators. No one ever used those stairs. That's probably why they hadn't bothered fixing the flickering fluorescent light on the 4th floor landing. I rushed down the metal steps, my dress shoes making hollow clanging sounds. The handrail was cold under my palm, that thick industrial-grade steel they used in buildings from the 70s. As I rounded the bend between the 6th and 5th floors, something caught my eye. Movement in the polished surface of the handrail. It was my reflection, but something was wrong. I stopped. The reflection stopped too, but a split second later. Like watching a video feed with slight lag. I moved my hand up. The reflection followed, delayed by maybe a quarter of a second. My heart started beating faster, and I felt sweat forming on my forehead. I wiped it away with my sleeve. The reflection did the same, but again, just slightly behind. I stood there for what felt like minutes, moving my hand back and forth, watching the lagging reflection. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably someone wondering where I was. I jerked my hand away from the rail and practically ran down the remaining stairs. I burst through the door into the fourth-floor hallway, my breathing heavy. A woman from accounting gave me a strange look as she walked past. I made it to the meeting 15 minutes late. My boss, Davis, shot me an irritated glance as I slipped into an empty chair. I couldn't focus on the PowerPoint presentation. My hands were shaking, and I kept thinking about what I'd seen in that stairwell. I told myself it was just my eyes playing tricks. Too much coffee, not enough sleep. The usual excuses. After the meeting, I took the elevator back to my floor. I avoided that stairwell for the rest of the day. I finished my reports, answered emails, made small talk with coworkers, normal stuff. But my mind kept drifting back to that reflection. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the incident in my head. The soft whir of my bedroom fan filled the silence. My cat, Max, was curled up at my feet, purring quietly. Around 3 a.m., I grabbed my phone and started researching reflection delays and optical illusions. I found nothing useful, just physics papers I couldn't understand, and conspiracy theory websites. The next morning, I almost called in sick, but I knew I had to go back and check. I had to know if I was losing my mind. I got to work early before most people arrived. The office was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional ding of the elevators. I stood in front of the stairwell door for 5 minutes, my hand on the push bar. Finally, I went in. The stairs looked normal in the morning light coming through the narrow windows. I walked down slowly, watching my reflection in the handrail. Nothing unusual happened until I reached that same spot between the 6th and 5th floors. Then I saw it again. I raised my right hand. The reflection followed a fraction of a second later. I waved. The reflection waved back, delayed. I felt the cold metal under my left hand, gripping the rail tightly. My stomach churned. I took out my phone and started recording. But when I played back the video, the delay wasn't there. The reflection moved in perfect sync on my phone screen. I tried again, this time recording in slow motion. Same result. I spent my lunch break in that stairwell, testing different things. I brought a stopwatch app on my phone. The delay was always the same, about 0. 3 seconds. I tried different movements. Fast, slow, simple, complex. The result never changed. My reflection was consistently behind. By the end of the week, I had developed a routine. I'd arrive early, spend time in the stairwell documenting everything, then try to work normally for the rest of the day. I filled 3 notebooks with observations and sketches. I started losing sleep. Dark circles formed under my eyes. My coworkers noticed. "You okay, man?" Tom from IT asked me one morning. "You look like hell." "Yeah, just working on a big project," I said. He nodded and walked away. The next week, I noticed something new. The delay was getting longer. Not by much, maybe 1/10 of a second. But I was sure of it. I had been timing the delays obsessively. I started spending my evenings researching quantum physics and relativity theory. I ordered books on temporal mechanics, my apartment filled with stacks of scientific journals. One night I was in the stairwell late, long after everyone else had gone home. The delay had stretched to almost half a second. I stood there, moving my arms, watching the lagging reflection. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Then the reflection did something I hadn't done. It smiled. I didn't smile. I was sure of it. I felt my face, neutral expression, mouth straight. But in the reflection, I saw my lips curl up in a slight smirk. I stumbled backward, hitting the opposite wall. My heart pounded in my chest. The reflection's smile widened. I ran out of there so fast I nearly fell down the stairs. I didn't stop until I reached my car in the parking garage. My hands shook so badly I could barely get my key in the ignition. I called in sick the next day, and the day after that. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by my research notes, trying to make sense of what was happening. Max watched me from the windowsill as I paced back and forth. I covered all the mirrors in my apartment with sheets. On the 3rd day, my boss called. "We need you to come in," Davis said. "The quarterly reports are due." and you're the only one who knows the new system. I wanted to quit right then, but I needed this job. I had rent to pay, student loans to cover. So I went back. I took the elevator. I used the main stairwell when I had to. I avoided anything reflective. Windows, computer screens, the glass walls of the conference rooms. I kept my eyes down in the bathroom, washing my hands as quickly as possible. But I couldn't stop thinking about that other reflection. What was it doing in that stairwell? Was the delay still growing? Was it still smiling? After 2 weeks of avoiding it, I had to know. I waited until everyone left for the day. The office was dark except for the emergency exit signs. I stood in front of that stairwell door, my heart hammering in my chest. Then I went in. The delay was now nearly 2 seconds. I raised my hand. I waited. The reflection raised its hand. I lowered mine. Waited. The reflection followed. But this time, before lowering its hand completely, it waved at me. A small, deliberate wave. I felt the blood drain from my face. The reflection was still smiling, that same slight smirk. I watched as it lifted its hand again, while mine stayed firmly at my side. It pointed at me. Then it pointed down. I looked down at my feet. Nothing seemed unusual. When I looked back up, the reflection had changed position. It was standing slightly turned, as if getting ready to walk away from me. But I hadn't moved. My phone slipped from my sweaty hand and clattered on the metal steps. The sound echoed through the stairwell. In the handrail, the reflection turned its head to look at me over its shoulder. The smile was gone. Its expression was cold, calculating. I grabbed my phone and backed away, keeping my eyes on the reflection. It stayed where it was, watching me. When I reached the door, I yanked it open and ran through the dark office to the elevator. I jabbed the button repeatedly until the doors opened. I didn't go back to work after that. I sent Davis an email saying I had a family emergency and needed to take some time off. He wasn't happy, but I had enough vacation days saved up. I spent the next few days in my apartment with the blinds closed. I ordered delivery food and avoided looking at the delivery person's face when they came to the door. I kept thinking about that expression on the reflection's face, that cold, predatory look. Max started acting strange. He would sit and stare at the covered mirrors for hours, his tail twitching. Sometimes he would hiss at them for no reason. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked. After a week, Davis called again. "Either you come back to work tomorrow, or we'll have to let you go," he said. "I'm sorry, but we can't keep covering for you." I sat on my couch for a long time after that call, staring at the sheet-covered mirror on my wall. I needed that job. But the thought of going back to that stairwell made me feel sick. In the end, I decided to go back one last time. I had to understand what was happening. I had to confront it. I arrived at the office at midnight. The security guard gave me a strange look, but let me in when I showed my ID. The building was completely empty. My footsteps echoed in the dark hallways. I took the elevator to the 8th floor. My plan was to start at the top and work my way down, checking the reflection at each level. I had my phone ready to record everything. The stairwell door creaked when I opened it. The emergency lights cast a dim red glow over everything. I walked to the railing and looked at my reflection. The delay was now nearly 5 seconds. I watched as my movements played out long after I made them. Then the reflection stopped following me completely. It stood there staring at me while I remained frozen in place. Slowly, deliberately, it reached out and placed its hand against its side of the rail. I felt compelled to do the same. The metal was ice cold under my palm. The reflection's smile returned, wider than before. Then it spoke. I couldn't hear anything, but I saw its lips move. It was saying something over and over. I leaned closer, trying to read its lips. Switch. I tried to pull my hand away from the rail, but I couldn't move. My whole arm felt numb. The coldness from the metal was spreading up through my shoulder, across my chest. The reflection kept smiling, kept mouthing that word. Switch, switch, switch. The numbness reached my legs. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The reflection was becoming more solid, more real, while I felt myself becoming less so. My vision started to blur. The last thing I saw clearly was my reflection stepping away from the rail. But it wasn't a reflection anymore. It was solid, real, three-dimensional. It looked down at its hands, my hands, flexing the fingers experimentally. Then it looked at me and smiled one last time. I tried to move, to speak, to do anything, but I couldn't. I was trapped in the cold, flat surface of the handrail. I watched helplessly as it picked up my phone from where I'd dropped it. It checked its appearance in the phone's black screen, straightening my tie, fixing my hair. Then it walked to the stairwell door, opened it, and stepped through. The door closed with a heavy thud that echoed through the stairwell. I'm still here. I can see everything that happens in this stairwell. Sometimes people walk past and I try to get their attention, but all they see is their own reflection, moving just a fraction of a second too slow. I see it sometimes going up and down the stairs like nothing happened, living my life, working at my desk, driving my car, living in my apartment, feeding my cat. It's good at pretending to be me. No one has noticed anything wrong. But sometimes, when it passes through this stairwell, it looks at me and smiles that cold smile. And I wonder how many other reflections in this building aren't reflections at all. How many other people are trapped in mirrors and windows and polished metal surfaces, watching their lives being lived by something else. If you're reading this, do me a favor. Next time you see your reflection, watch it carefully. Watch how it moves. And if you notice even the slightest delay, run. Run as fast as you can, because once you notice it, it notices you too. And it's always looking for a chance to switch. The first drop hit my hard hat at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I checked my watch because that's what I do on every job. Note the start time. 23 years of plumbing work taught me to track my hours down to the minute, but this job at the Marlowe building would turn out different from any other call I'd taken before. I stood in the third-floor bathroom, water dripping from a crack in the ceiling that shouldn't have been there. The building manager, Mrs. Chen, had called about a leak. Simple enough. But something felt off from the moment I walked in. The air felt thick, like before a thunderstorm, and there was this sound. At first, I thought it was just the old pipes, but it wasn't. It was higher pitched. A buzz. The tenants on the fourth floor complained about water damage yesterday, Mrs. Chen said, pointing up at the wet ceiling. Her short gray hair was pulled back tight, and she kept adjusting her glasses. But when we went to check their bathroom, it was bone dry. No signs of leaking anywhere. I ran my hand along the wall. The paint felt cold and slightly damp. Any history of plumbing issues in this section of the building? Not in the 15 years I've managed this place. She checked her phone. I have another meeting. Will you be okay to check it out yourself? Yeah, I'll find the problem. I set my toolbox down on the cracked tile floor. Just need to access the fourth floor bathroom to start. She handed me a master key and left. The bathroom door clicked shut behind her, and that's when I noticed the buzzing had gotten louder. Just slightly, but enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore. I pulled out my flashlight and aimed it at the ceiling. The crack was about 2 feet long, hairline thin, with water beading along its length. I grabbed my moisture meter from the toolbox and pressed it against the drywall. The reading went straight to red. The entire ceiling was saturated. The buzzing increased another notch. I climbed up on my stepladder to get a closer look. The water dropping from the crack was clear, but had a strange sheen to it like oil on a puddle. I touched one of the drops. It felt wrong. Too thick. Too warm. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Text from the office. How's the Marlowe job going? ETA? I typed back. Need to check upstairs. We'll update in 30. The fourth floor hallway was empty. The building was one of those old converted office spaces from the 1920s, all dark wood and brass fixtures. The kind of place that's been renovated a dozen times but never quite right. My boots left marks on the worn carpet as I walked to the bathroom that should have been directly above the leak. The buzzing was definitely louder up here. I could feel it in my teeth. I unlocked the bathroom door and pushed it open. The fluorescent light flickered twice before staying on. This bathroom was identical to the one below. Same layout, same cracked tiles, same tired look. But it was completely dry. Not a drop of water anywhere. I checked every pipe in the wall with my infrared scanner. Nothing. No leaks, no moisture behind the tiles, no water damage at all. It didn't make sense. Water doesn't just appear from nowhere. It has to come from somewhere. The buzzing pressed against my eardrums. I knocked on walls, checked the seals around the toilet, ran water in the sink. Everything worked perfectly. Too perfectly, maybe. The pipes didn't even make that usual groan that old buildings get. My watch showed 3:15 p.m. I'd been here less than 30 minutes, but my head was starting to hurt. The buzzing had become a constant pressure, like being underwater too deep. Back downstairs, the leak had gotten worse. Water now dripped from 3 separate cracks, and the ceiling bulged slightly in the center. I took photos and measurements, then pulled out my phone to call my supervisor. No signal. The screen showed full bars, but the call wouldn't go through. The buzzing surged and I dropped the phone. It clattered on the tiles as the lights flickered. For a second, just a split second, I thought I saw something move in the water running down the wall. Like a shadow, but wrong somehow. Too sharp, too angular. I picked up my phone. The screen was cracked but still worked. 3:23 p.m. I needed to check the building plans. The Marlowe had to have a maintenance room or access panel somewhere. These old buildings always had space between floors for pipes and electrical. I found Mrs. Chen in her office down the hall. She was on the phone but hung up when I walked in. "Found anything?" she asked. "Need to see the building plans." "There has to be access to the space between floors." She pulled open a filing cabinet. "We should have the original blueprints here somewhere. The building's been modified so many times, though." She flipped through folders. "Here." The blueprints were old, the paper yellow and brittle. I spread them out on her desk. The building's layout was a maze of additions and renovations, but there it was. A maintenance access point in the janitor's closet, with a crawl space running between the 3rd and 4th floors. "Mind if I take a look?" I asked. "Go ahead. Key's the same one I gave you." The janitor's closet was at the end of the hall. The buzzing followed me there, stronger now. My head throbbed with each step. The access panel was behind some shelves. I had to move mops and cleaning supplies to reach it. The panel was sealed with 4 heavy screws, covered in paint from decades of renovations. I unscrewed them with my power driver. The last one stuck, and when it finally came loose, it was hot to the touch. The buzzing was loud now, a physical thing pressing against my skull. I shined my flashlight into the access space. A narrow crawl space stretched into darkness, pipes and electrical conduit running along its length. The air that came out was warm and wet. 3:41 p.m. I should have called for backup. Should have told Mrs. Chen I needed another opinion, but I didn't. Instead, I grabbed my tool belt, clipped on my flashlight, and crawled in. The space was tight, barely 3 feet high. I had to army crawl, pushing my tool bag ahead of me. The metal ductwork above me vibrated with that endless buzz. 20 feet in, I found where the pipes crossed between floors. Water dripped steadily from a joint, but the pipe wasn't leaking. The water was coming through the metal itself, beading up like sweat on skin. The buzzing pulsed. My flashlight caught something ahead. A shape that didn't belong. I crawled closer. The wall between the floors bulged inward. The metal and concrete warped like melted plastic. The surface rippled, actually rippled, as I watched. Water ran down its surface in thick streams. The buzzing became a rhythm, a pattern I could almost understand. I reached out to touch the wall. The surface was hot and seemed to move under my fingers. I jerked my hand back. My skin tingled where I'd touched it. Something moved in the darkness behind the warped wall. My flashlight beam caught edges that shouldn't exist. Geometric shapes that hurt to look at. Angles that seemed to bend in impossible directions. The buzzing formed words I couldn't quite hear. I started backing up. My elbow hit a pipe and the clang echoed through the crawl space. The shapes behind the wall shifted. A crack appeared in the warped surface, spreading like ice breaking. Water poured out, but it moved wrong, flowing upward, splitting into perfect geometric patterns before falling. The buzzing became a scream. I don't remember how I got out of that crawl space. I remember my flashlight dying. Remember the sound of metal tearing. Remember the cold touch of that impossible water on my neck as I scrambled backward. I slammed the access panel shut and drove the screws back in with my bare hands. My tools were still in there. Let them stay there. Mrs. Chen found me sitting on the floor of the janitor's closet, soaking wet and shaking. "Mr. Harrison, are you all right? Did you find the leak?" I stood up. My legs felt weak. "You need to evacuate the building now." "What? Why?" "The water isn't coming from the pipes, it's coming from somewhere else, something else. Call a structural engineer. Better yet, call a demolition crew. This building isn't right." She started to argue, but then we both heard it. The sound of metal groaning, followed by a crash from the third-floor bathroom. The buzzing rose to a pitch that made us cover our ears. Water began seeping under the bathroom door and into the hallway. It moved in straight lines, forming perfect geometric patterns on the floor. Mrs. Chen's face went pale. She pulled out her phone and hit the fire alarm. I didn't stay to help with the evacuation. I walked out of the Marlowe building at 4:13 p.m. and didn't look back. I sent my resignation email to the plumbing company that night. They demolished the Marlowe building 3 months later, after 3 engineering firms failed to explain the growing network of impossible cracks in its walls, or the buzzing sound that drove out every tenant, or the water that moved against gravity and burned through everything it touched. I drive past the empty lot sometimes. There's nothing there now but gravel and concrete barriers. But sometimes when I stop at the red light on the corner, I can feel it, that low buzz in my teeth, calling me back to what I saw in that crawl space, to the shapes that wait behind the walls of our world. I don't stop at that red light anymore. I take the long way around. My watch stopped at 4:13 p.m. that day. I keep it in my desk drawer. Sometimes late at night I can hear it ticking, but when I open the drawer to check, the hands never move. They just point to 4:13, while something that sounds like buzzing comes from somewhere deep inside its works. The wooden steps creaked under my feet as I climbed to my grandparents' attic. My phone's flashlight beam cut through decades of dust floating in the air. I hadn't been up here since I was a kid, but my grandmother asked me to fetch her old recipe box, and I couldn't say no. The attic smelled like mothballs and old paper, that distinct scent that made my nose itch. I reached the top of the stairs and my chest tightened. The space felt wrong. Not just dusty or old, but wrong in a way that made my hands shake. Boxes and furniture made dark shapes in the shadows. My throat went dry. The air felt thick, heavy, like it was pressing against my skin. My grandmother's voice drifted up from downstairs. "Did you find it, James? It should be in one of the boxes near the old trunk." "Not yet," I called back, but my voice came out rough. Sweat ran down my back despite the cool air. I moved between stacked boxes, my shoes leaving prints in the dust. The trunk sat against the far wall under a small window. It was bigger than I remembered, a heavy wooden chest with brass corners and a curved lid. Dark stains marked the wood, and the brass lock had turned green with age. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I knelt beside it. The recipe box wasn't anywhere nearby, but something pulled at me to open that trunk. I remembered playing up here as a kid, looking through old clothes and yearbooks, but I'd never opened this trunk. Had it always been locked? The lid creaked up when I tried it. Not locked after all. Inside, the smell of old paper grew stronger. Stacks of photos filled the trunk, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Black and white snapshots, color Polaroids, studio portraits, all mixed together without any organization. I picked up the first stack. My grandfather's handwriting marked the back of the top photo. Family picnic, 1962. The image showed a group of people on checkered blankets, paper plates balanced on their laps. I recognized my grandmother, young and laughing. My grandfather beside her, his arm around her shoulders. The next photo, Christmas 1957. My great-aunt Ellen opening presents, tinsel on a tree behind her. Then, Sarah's wedding, 1973. My mom as a bridesmaid, looking exactly like my sister. Normal family photos. So why were my hands still shaking? Why did the air feel so heavy I could barely breathe? I flipped through more photos. Birthdays, graduations, beach trips, Thanksgivings, decades of family history in fading colors and creased corners. Then I stopped. The photo in my hand showed a backyard barbecue. July 4th, 1969, written on the back. About 15 people stood around a grill, paper plates and cups in their hands. I recognized most of them. My grandparents, great-aunts and uncles, family friends who were long dead now. And there, on the edge of the group, was me. Not someone who looked like me. It was me. The same face I saw in the mirror every morning. The same scar on my chin from a bike accident when I was 12. The same crooked smile. Even the same t-shirt I'd worn last week. But this photo was from 1969, 20 years before I was born. My stomach lurched. The photo slipped from my trembling fingers. I grabbed another one. Martin's graduation, 1954. A crowd outside a high school, graduates in caps and gowns. And there I was again, standing in the back row. Same face, same height, same everything. Another photo. Family reunion, 1942. A large group on the steps of a church. I found myself immediately leaning against a column, hands in my pockets, looking straight at the camera. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hear. Sweat soaked through my shirt. I dug through the photos frantically now, finding myself in image after image. School plays from the 1930s, factory workers in the 1920s, a World War I Army unit, a turn-of-the-century wedding party, the same face, my face, unchanged across decades, sometimes in the background, sometimes front and center, sometimes looking at the camera, sometimes caught mid-conversation, but always unmistakably me. I shoved the photos away and scrambled back from the trunk. My back hit a stack of boxes, sending them crashing down. Dust filled the air. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "James, are you okay up there?" My grandmother's voice seemed to come from very far away. I looked back at the scattered photos. In the beam of my dropped phone's light, my own face stared up at me from 100 different years. My legs shook as I stood. I had to get out, had to get away from those photos. But as I turned toward the stairs, movement caught my eye. Someone stood in the shadows by the window. I raised my phone, the light beam trembling. A man stepped forward. He wore clothes I'd never seen before, old-fashioned things that belonged in a museum. But his face, my face, he smiled. The same crooked smile I saw in my mirror every morning. "I've been waiting a long time to meet you," he said. I ran. I slammed into the attic door and practically fell down the stairs. My grandmother stood at the bottom, looking worried. "James, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I pushed past her and out of the house. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I pulled away, I looked up at the attic window. A face watched me go. My face. I drove straight home and locked every door and window, but I couldn't escape the questions that filled my mind. Who was that man? How could he have my face? How could I be in those photos decades before I was born? I didn't sleep that night or the next. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photos, saw my own face looking back at me across a century of family history. After 3 days, my grandmother called. "James, are you all right? You left in such a hurry the other day." "I'm fine," I lied. My voice sounded rough from lack of sleep. "Just wasn't feeling well." "Well, I hope you're better now. But listen, the strangest thing happened after you left. I went up to the attic to look for that recipe box myself, and I found all these old photos scattered around. I've been going through them, but I can't find something that I know should be there. My mouth went dry. What's missing? There was this whole set of photos of your great-uncle James, the one you were named after. He disappeared in 1927, you know. No one ever knew what happened to him. But we had so many photos of him, and now I can't find a single one. It's the strangest thing. They showed him all through the years at different family events. He looked so much like you, dear. Everyone always said you were his spitting image. The phone slipped from my numb fingers. I could hear my grandmother calling my name, but her voice seemed to come from very far away, or perhaps from very long ago. I went to my bedroom mirror. The face that looked back at me was the same one I'd seen in those photos, the same one that had smiled at me in the attic. Uncle James's face, my face. But was it really my face? Or had it been his all along? The next day, I went back to my grandparents' house. I had to know, had to understand. The attic door stood open when I arrived. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light streaming through the window. The trunk sat where I'd left it, lid still raised. I approached it slowly, my feet leaving fresh prints in the dust beside the old ones. The photos were stacked neatly now, my grandmother's doing probably. My hands trembled as I reached for them. But before I could touch them, I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. Heavy steps, familiar steps. I turned. He stood there, Uncle James, wearing clothes from another century, wearing my face. Or maybe I was wearing his. I've been waiting 97 years to pass it on, he said. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The air grew thick, heavy. Darkness crept in at the edges of my vision. The last thing I saw was my own face smiling at me as the world faded away. When I woke up, everything was different. The attic was the same, but the light was wrong. The dust was wrong. The smell was wrong. I stood up slowly. My clothes felt strange. Heavy wool, stiff collar, the kind of suit men wore in old photographs. On the floor where I'd been lying was a phone. My phone. Beside it lay a small stack of photos. I picked them up with trembling hands. The top one showed a family picnic. July 4th, 2023, written on the back in my grandmother's shaky handwriting. In the photo, I stood at the edge of the group, wearing the t-shirt I'd had on when I first came to the attic. But that wasn't me anymore. That was someone else. Someone who wouldn't exist for almost a century. I tucked the photos into my pocket, my new pocket, in my new clothes, in my new time. Then I walked down the attic stairs, each step creaking in a familiar way that was somehow completely different. A woman I didn't recognize looked up from the kitchen table. There you are, James. I was just about to call you down for dinner. I smiled at her, my great-grandmother, young and beautiful. Sorry to keep you waiting, I said. She didn't seem to notice anything strange about me, about my clothes, about the year. I sat down at the table in a kitchen that looked both foreign and familiar. The woman who would one day be my great-grandmother served soup in bowls I recognized from my grandmother's china cabinet. And somewhere, 97 years in the future, a man with my face was waking up in my life, getting ready to live the decades that would lead him to that attic, to that trunk full of impossible photos. I wondered if he was as scared as I had been, if he understood what had happened any better than I did. But mostly I wondered about the man who had worn this face before me, the one who had passed it to Uncle James, and the one before him. How far back did it go? How many men had lived these years, waiting for their turn to pass on the face, the life, the curse? I would find out, I supposed. I had 97 years to look through those photos, 97 years to understand, 97 years until I could finally pass it on again. The soup grew cold in front of me as I sat there, a man out of time, wearing a face that had never truly been mine. Outside the window, automobiles that belonged in museums drove past. A radio played music that wouldn't be oldies for another century. And upstairs in a trunk that was newer than I remembered but older than it should be, photos waited. Photos of faces. My face. Our face. The face that would keep living these years over and over until when? I didn't know, but I had 97 years to figure it out. I picked up my spoon and began to eat my soup. It tasted exactly like my grandmother's recipe. The recipe she'd sent me to find in the attic on the day I stopped being myself. I wasn't drunk. That's the first thing everyone asks when I tell this story. I had one beer at dinner 4 hours earlier. I know what I saw that night in the parking garage. The security cameras didn't catch it, but something was there. I've replayed it in my head 1,000 times since then, and I still can't explain it. It was 11:42 p.m. when I left the office. I remember checking my phone as I locked up, cursing myself for staying so late again. The parking garage under our building is huge, 5 levels underground with space for hundreds of cars. At that hour, it was nearly empty. My footsteps echoed off the concrete walls as I walked to level B3, where I always park. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, creating alternating patches of harsh light and shadow between the support columns. My car, a gray Honda Civic, was parked in spot B3 127, near the back corner. I'd picked that spot that morning because it was close to the elevator. Funny how small decisions like that can end up mattering so much. I was about 20 feet from my car when the first cold draft hit my neck. The garage ventilation system kicks on and off automatically, so I didn't think much of it. I just pulled my jacket tighter and kept walking, my dress shoes clicking against the concrete. The draft got stronger as I approached my car. That's when I noticed the temperature had dropped significantly. I could see my breath forming little clouds in front of my face. In September, in Texas, that's not normal. My hand tightened around my keys. I hit the unlock button when I was about 10 feet away. The car's lights flashed and the beep echoed through the garage. That's when I saw it, a shadow moving behind my car. Not cast on the wall, but like a dark shape sliding across the ground. It was about the size of a person, but it moved wrong. Too fluid, too fast. My body froze. The keys dug into my palm as I squeezed them harder. The shadow disappeared behind my car's trunk, then reappeared on the other side, stretching longer as it moved. There was no light source that could have created it. No one else was around to cast it. Hello? My voice came out stronger than I expected. It bounced off the walls, coming back to me in echoes. Is someone there? No response. Just the constant hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint rumble of the ventilation system. I took out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, creating new shadows behind every column. I swept it across the area behind my car. Nothing. Just empty parking spots and concrete walls. My hands were shaking now, making the flashlight beam dance erratically. I forced myself to breathe slowly, trying to calm down. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe headlights from a car on another level or shadows from the ventilation fans. Something normal. I walked around my car, keeping the flashlight trained on the ground. The concrete was dry and empty. No oil stains, no trash. Nothing that could explain what I'd seen. The cold spot was still there, following me as I moved. The smart thing would have been to go back upstairs, call security, wait for someone to escort me to my car. But I was already here and my car was right in front of me. It seemed ridiculous to run away from a shadow. I reached for the driver's door handle. The metal was ice cold against my fingers. As I pulled the door open, I saw the shadow again, this time in my peripheral vision. It moved faster now, sliding across the floor like black water, coming toward my feet. I jumped into the car and slammed the door shut. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys. They clattered onto the floor mat, and I had to feel around for them in the dark. The whole time I kept my eyes on the windows, watching for any movement outside. The shadow appeared again, this time sliding up the driver's side window like a dark curtain. I couldn't see through it. The cold intensified inside the car and my breath came out in white puffs. The windows started to fog up. I found my keys and jammed them into the ignition. The engine roared to life and the headlights came on automatically. The shadow vanished instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. The temperature in the car began to rise as the heater kicked in. I sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. The garage looked normal now, just concrete and fluorescent lights and empty parking spots. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I put the car in reverse and backed out quickly, checking all my mirrors. Nothing unusual. I drove to the exit ramp faster than I should have, taking the turns too wide. The garage attendant barely looked up from his phone as I swiped my card and left. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that shadow moving in my mind, replaying every detail. I convinced myself I must have imagined it. Stress, exhaustion, and an overactive imagination. That had to be the explanation. The next morning I went to the building's security office. The night guard, Ron, was just finishing his shift. I knew him from all the late nights I worked. He was a retired cop who always had stories about his days on the force. "Hey, Ron, can you check the security footage from B3 last night around 11:45? He didn't ask why. That's one thing I always liked about Ron. He didn't waste time with unnecessary questions. He just pulled up the footage on his monitor and started scrolling through it. The camera had a clear view of my parking spot. I watched myself walk into frame, stop, and look around. The timestamp showed 11:43 p.m. The image was grainy and black and white, but I could see myself taking out my phone and using the flashlight. I looked scared, which was embarrassing to watch, but there was no shadow, no strange movements, no dark shapes sliding across the floor. Just me, acting jumpy for no apparent reason. "See anything unusual?" Ron asked. I shook my head. "Guess not. Thanks for checking." He gave me a knowing look. "Garages can play tricks on your mind at night. All those shadows, echoes. Your brain tries to make patterns out of nothing." I nodded and left, but I knew what I'd seen. The cameras might not have caught it, but something was there. The cold, the movement, the way it climbed up my window. Those weren't tricks of the mind. For the next week, I left work before dark. I took a different parking spot closer to the entrance, but I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. I started researching similar experiences online. Most were obviously fake, written for attention, but a few seemed genuine, and they described similar things: moving shadows, cold spots, the feeling of being watched. 2 weeks after the incident, I had to stay late again. A client deadline couldn't be avoided. By the time I finished, it was almost midnight. I stood in my office, staring at my car keys, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to call an Uber, but that felt like giving in to fear. I was a grown man, afraid of a parking garage because of something that probably hadn't even happened. The security cameras proved nothing was there. I took the elevator down to B3. This time I had my phone ready to record video. If something happened again, I wanted proof. The garage was even emptier than before. My footsteps seemed louder, more intrusive. I walked slowly, scanning every shadow, every corner. The phone's screen cast a blue glow on the concrete. I reached my car without incident. No cold spots, no moving shadows. I almost felt disappointed. Then I played back the video on my phone just to be sure. That's when I saw it. In the recording, a dark shape moved behind me as I walked, staying just out of my peripheral vision. Every time I turned my head, it slid to the other side, always keeping the same distance. The camera had caught what my eyes couldn't see. I ran back to the security office, but Ron wasn't there. The day shift guard didn't know how to access the camera footage. By the time I got someone to check it the next morning, my phone had crashed and wouldn't turn back on. The video was gone. I quit my job 2 weeks later, found a new position at a company with above-ground parking. I tell myself it was for the better commute, the higher salary, but I know the real reason. Sometimes, late at night, I still check my rearview mirror more often than necessary. I watch for movements in the shadows, feel for sudden cold spots. The rational part of my brain says nothing happened that night. The cameras proved it. But I know what I saw. And I know that somewhere in that underground garage something is still moving in the darkness, waiting for someone else to stay too late at work. I've never parked in an underground garage since then. I don't care if I have to walk further or pay more. Some places you just shouldn't go alone at night. Some things the cameras don't catch. That's my story. Believe it or don't, I'm past trying to convince people. But next time you're alone in a parking garage late at night, pay attention to the shadows. And if you feel a cold draft on your neck, don't look behind you. Just walk faster, get in your car, and drive away. Because sometimes, the rational explanation isn't the right one. Sometimes the cameras miss things our eyes can see. And sometimes the shadows move on their own. My back ached as I lifted another heavy box from Tom and Sarah's moving truck. The summer heat made sweat drip down my face. Just 2 more hours of this and I could go home, take a shower, and crash on my couch. That was the plan anyway. "Hey Mike, can you help with this dresser?" Tom called from inside the truck. I set down the box and climbed back in. The dresser was one of those solid wood monsters from the 1950s that weighed about as much as a small car. We shuffled sideways through their new house's narrow hallway, my fingers going numb from gripping the edges. The floorboards creaked under our feet. Tom and Sarah had bought this old Victorian place for a steal, probably because it needed so much work. Paint peeled from the walls and half the fixtures were original to the house. "In here," Sarah directed, pointing to their bedroom. She held the door open as we maneuvered inside. That's when I saw it. A massive mirror dominated the far wall, reaching from floor to ceiling. The frame was dark carved wood, covered in swirling patterns that drew your eye in weird ways. It didn't match anything else in the room. "Where'd you get that?" I asked after we set down the dresser. "Came with the house," Tom said, stretching his back. "Previous owner left it. Too big to move, I guess. Sarah wants to take it down, but I kind of like it." I walked closer to get a better look. The mirror's surface had that slightly warped quality of old glass, making my reflection waver slightly. But something wasn't right. I blinked hard and looked again. The mirror showed the empty bedroom. Just bare walls, dusty hardwood floors, and sunlight streaming through the windows. But Tom and Sarah were standing right behind me. I could see them in my peripheral vision, sorting through boxes. They weren't in the reflection at all. Guys?" My voice came out higher than I meant it to. "Come look at this." They walked over. 3 of us stood in front of the mirror, but only my wavering reflection looked back. "What the hell?" Tom whispered. Sarah reached out to touch the glass. Her hand made contact with a soft click. In the reflection, nothing moved. "This is impossible," she said. Her face had gone pale. I reached toward the mirror, too. The surface felt ice cold under my fingertips. A sharp tingling sensation shot up my arm and I jerked back. "Did you feel that?" I asked. They both nodded. We stood there staring at the mirror, none of us speaking. The room felt colder suddenly. "Maybe it's just a weird trick of the light," Tom suggested, but his voice shook slightly. "Or something wrong with the glass." "Yeah, maybe." I couldn't take my eyes off my lone reflection. It didn't look quite right anymore, slightly off in ways I couldn't pinpoint. The angles of my face seemed wrong. The movements weren't quite in sync. "We should finish bringing in the boxes," Sarah said finally. She turned away from the mirror quickly, like she couldn't stand to look at it anymore. We went back to moving furniture. But the mood had changed. The mirror loomed behind us as we worked. I kept glancing at it, trying to catch it showing something different. But every time, it just showed the empty room. Around sunset, we finished bringing everything inside. Tom ordered pizza and we sat on boxes in the kitchen, eating and trying to pretend everything was normal. But we all kept looking toward the bedroom. "I can stay and help you take it down," I offered. "We could do it tonight." Sarah nodded immediately. "Please, I don't want to sleep with that thing in there." Tom looked relieved too. I'll get some tools. We approached the mirror cautiously, armed with screwdrivers and a pry bar. The carved wooden frame seemed to be attached to the wall with heavy iron brackets. I reached up to start removing the first bracket. The second my screwdriver touched the metal, every light in the house went out. Sarah screamed. Complete darkness pressed in around us. Even the streetlights outside had gone dark. "Everyone okay?" Tom called out. "I've got my phone." A weak light illuminated our faces as he turned on his phone's flashlight. The beam caught the mirror's surface and reflected back wrong, too bright, too sharp. I squinted against the glare. That's when I saw it. In the mirror, a figure stood behind my reflection. Tall and thin, with limbs too long for its body. Its face was blank, smooth skin where features should be. I spun around. Nothing was there. But when I looked back at the mirror, the figure remained. It raised one elongated hand and pressed it against the glass. The mirror's surface rippled like water. A high-pitched whine filled the air, making my teeth ache. The figure's hand pushed through, fingers emerging into our reality. "Run!" I grabbed Sarah's arm and yanked her toward the door. Tom was right behind us. We sprinted down the stairs and out of the house. The street was completely dark. No lights in any windows, no cars, no moon. Just absolute blackness beyond the weak beam of Tom's phone. What the fuck was that? Sarah's whole body shook as she clung to Tom. "We need to get out of here," I said. "Get in the car, we'll go to my place." We piled into Tom's sedan. The engine sputtered but wouldn't turn over. No, Tom muttered, trying again. Nothing. I looked back at the house. Light blazed from the bedroom window. Not normal electric light, but a sickly greenish glow that pulsed and wavered. "We have to run for it," I said. "There's a gas station about half a mile down Mason Street. We can call for help from there." We got out of the car. The silence pressed in around us. No crickets, no distant traffic, no wind in the trees. Just the sound of our breathing and footsteps on the pavement. Tom's phone light flickered and died. Shit. He shook it frantically. Battery was almost full. We huddled closer together in the darkness. I felt something cold brush against the back of my neck. When I spun around, my hand passed through empty air. "Something touched me," Sarah whimpered. "Keep moving," I urged. "We're almost there." We stumbled forward in the dark, holding on to each other. Every few steps I felt that cold touch again, on my arm, my back, my face, like icy fingers trailing across my skin. The gas station's lights appeared ahead, a beacon in the darkness. We broke into a run. 20 feet from the store, Sarah screamed. I turned to see her being yanked backward by something I couldn't quite focus on, like a heat shimmer in the air, but darker and wrong. Tom and I grabbed her arms and pulled. She came free with a sound like tearing fabric. We crashed through the gas station doors. The fluorescent lights hurt my eyes after the darkness. The clerk stared at us as we stood there gasping. "You folks okay?" he asked. Before we could answer, the lights flickered. In the security mirror mounted in the corner, I saw them. Dozens of those elongated figures pressing against the glass, reaching through. "We need to go," I shouted. "Now!" But it was too late. The lights went out. In the total darkness, I felt cold hands grab my shoulders and pull. I fought and thrashed, but their grip was impossibly strong. They dragged me backward, toward something that felt like glass but moved like water. The last thing I heard was Sarah screaming my name. Then I was through the mirror. I floated in a vast darkness. No up or down, no light or sound. Just endless nothing in all directions. Occasionally I caught glimpses of movement in the void. Those twisted figures drifting past like deep-sea creatures. Time meant nothing there. I might have floated for minutes or years. I couldn't feel my body anymore. My thoughts grew sluggish and strange. Then suddenly, light. Real light. I slammed back into my body with crushing force. I was lying on a hardwood floor, gasping for air. I sat up slowly, head spinning. I was in Tom and Sarah's bedroom. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The mirror stood on the far wall, looking completely ordinary. My phone said it was 7:13 a.m. Less than 12 hours had passed. I staggered to my feet and ran downstairs. Tom and Sarah were unconscious on the living room floor. I shook them awake. We drove to my apartment in complete silence. None of us knew what to say. What could you say after something like that? Later that day, Tom called a contractor to remove the mirror. They found an empty wall behind it, no trace of how it had been mounted. The mirror itself shattered when they tried to take it down. The pieces showed only normal reflections. Tom and Sarah sold the house a month later. They moved into a small apartment with no mirrors larger than a medicine cabinet. I got rid of all the mirrors in my place too. I shave using my phone's camera now. Sometimes I catch glimpses of movement in windows or chrome surfaces, tall, thin figures that vanish when I turn to look. Sometimes at night I wake up feeling cold fingers on my skin. But the worst part is my reflection. It's subtle, but it's not quite right anymore. The movements are slightly delayed. The angles of my face are wrong. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see it smile when I'm not smiling. I think part of me is still trapped on the other side of that mirror. And sometimes late at night I feel it trying to pull the rest of me back through. They say breaking a mirror brings 7 years bad luck. I wonder what coming back through one does. I guess I'll find out. After all, those things let me come back for a reason. I just wish I knew what it was. I never should have come to this cabin alone. That's what everyone will say later, but they weren't there when I needed to get away from everything. They didn't feel the walls of my apartment closing in after Sarah left. They didn't understand why I had to escape somewhere, anywhere, even if it meant driving 3 hours to a remote rental cabin by Lake Morrison in late October. The footprints changed everything. I found them this morning, leading from the murky water straight to my bedroom window. Perfect impressions in the mud, each one filled with dark water. Each one pointed directly at where I'd been sleeping. But let me back up. I need to tell this right. I arrived yesterday afternoon around 4 p.m. The rental company had emailed me the door code and basic instructions. The cabin was exactly what the website showed. A small one-bedroom structure with wood siding painted a faded blue, sitting about 50 feet from the lake's edge. A narrow gravel path led from the small parking area to the front door. Dead leaves covered everything. The first thing I did was check all the doors and windows. It's a habit from living in the city. The front and back doors had good deadbolts. All 4 windows, one in the bedroom, one in the bathroom, and 2 in the main living area, had strong locks that clicked firmly into place. I tested each one twice. The inside was basic but clean. Small kitchen with a microwave and mini fridge. Living room with an old couch and TV. Bedroom with a queen bed and thick curtains. Bathroom with a shower stall. Everything smelled like pine cleaner. I unpacked quickly. Just a duffel bag with clothes and toiletries plus groceries for the weekend. The forecast showed rain, so I'd brought books and my laptop for entertainment. The Wi-Fi was surprisingly good for such a remote spot. The rest of the afternoon I sat on the small back deck watching the lake. The water was dark gray under the cloudy sky. A light wind made small waves lap at the rocky shore. 2 ducks paddled past. No other cabins were visible through the trees on either side. The isolation felt good at first. It started raining around sunset. I went inside, made a sandwich, and tried to read. The rain got heavier. Fat drops hammered the roof. Wind rattled the windows. Normal storm sounds, but they felt louder with no other noise to cover them. I checked all the locks again before bed. Everything secure. I took a hot shower, changed into sweats and a t-shirt, and got under the covers around 11 p.m. The bedroom window faced the lake. Even with the curtains closed, I could hear the water hitting the shore. Sleep came quickly. I was exhausted from the drive and from weeks of restless nights in my empty apartment. The bed was comfortable. The rain became white noise. Something woke me at 3:17 a.m. I remember checking my phone's glowing display. At first I thought it was just the storm. The rain was still pounding, but then I heard it, a scraping sound at my window, like fingernails on glass. I lay perfectly still, hardly breathing. The sound came again. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch. Just a tree branch, I whispered to myself, but I knew there weren't any trees close enough to reach the window. The scratching stopped. I heard something else, a wet slapping sound on the wooden deck outside, like bare feet on wet boards. Then silence. I didn't move for what felt like hours. My whole body was rigid. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep again because the next thing I knew, gray morning light was filtering through the curtains. I got up slowly, muscles stiff from tension. The rain had stopped. The room was cold. I went to the window and pulled back the curtain. That's when I saw them. The footprints. They started at the water's edge, clear impressions in the mud where someone had walked out of the lake. Bare human feet, adult-sized. They crossed the wet grass in a straight line to my window. The last print was a perfect stamp in the mud of the flower bed directly below the glass. I stared at them for a long time, trying to make them make sense. They weren't there yesterday, they couldn't be there. All the doors and windows were locked. I checked them 3 times. I ran through the cabin checking every lock again. All secure. No signs of forced entry. No wet footprints inside. Just those tracks outside, leading from the dark water to where I'd slept. My hands shook as I made coffee. I needed to think clearly. The footprints were roughly my size, maybe a bit larger. They were deep. Whoever made them was heavy. They showed toes, arches, heels, every detail perfect in the mud. I took photos with my phone. Then I walked down to the lake's edge, following the prints backward. The mud was soft and wet. My boots sank in. The tracks went right into the water, getting deeper until they disappeared under the surface about 6 feet out. The lake was calm now. Small waves lapped at the shore. The water was too dark and murky to see anything below the surface. Dead leaves floated past. A fish jumped somewhere further out. I walked the shoreline in both directions looking for more prints coming out of the water. Nothing. Just the one set, leading straight to my window. Back inside, I called the rental company. The bored-sounding woman who answered said no one else had access to the cabin during my stay. When I mentioned the footprints, she suggested local kids playing pranks. The nearest cabin is 2 miles away, she said. But sometimes teenagers come out in boats and mess around. Nothing to worry about. Want me to send someone to check it out? I said no. I didn't want to seem paranoid. But I kept thinking, who would wade into a freezing lake at night just to scratch at a window? And where did they go? The only prints were the ones leading to the cabin, none leading away. I spent the morning pacing, checking locks, looking out windows. Around noon it started raining again. Within an hour the footprints had mostly washed away. That should have made me feel better. Instead it made my skin crawl. The only evidence was disappearing. I tried to distract myself. I turned on the TV but couldn't focus on anything. I tried to read but kept looking up at every sound. The rain continued all afternoon. As the day got darker, my nerves got worse. Every splash from the lake made me jump. Every creak of the cabin settling made my heart race. I turned on every light in the place. I called Sarah. She didn't answer. I called my brother Mike. "Just come home," he said after I explained. "It's probably nothing, but why risk it? Pack up and drive back." He was right. But the thought of driving 3 hours in the dark and rain wasn't appealing. And something else kept me there. A need to know what had happened. Who had made those prints? Why my window? I decided to stay one more night. I pushed the bedroom dresser in front of the window. I propped a chair under both doorknobs. I found a heavy flashlight that could double as a weapon. The rain stopped around midnight. I lay in bed fully dressed, flashlight in hand, listening to the water drip from the roof. The moon came out, casting weak light through the curtains around the edges of the dresser. At 3:14 a.m. I heard it, that wet slapping sound on the deck. Slap, 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 pause. My whole body went rigid. The footsteps moved slowly across the wooden boards. Water dripped between the steps. They stopped outside my window. I heard breathing, slow and wet, like someone who had been underwater for a long time. The scratching started, fingernails on glass, longer and harder than the night before. The dresser scraped slightly against the floor. I aimed the flashlight at the window, thumb on the switch. The scratching stopped. Something pressed against the glass. A hand. I could see the dark shape through the curtain. Water ran down the window. The glass cracked. I hit the flashlight switch. Light flooded the room. Through the gap between the curtain and wall, I saw pale fingers pressing against the window. The nails were long and dark. Another crack spread across the glass. I scrambled out of bed, grabbed my phone and car keys, and ran. Through the living room, fumbling with the front door lock. Behind me, glass shattered. I made it to my car, hands shaking so bad I could barely hit the unlock button. As I slammed the door, I looked back at the cabin. A figure stood in the broken window, tall and thin, pale skin that looked wrong in the moonlight. Long dark hair plastered to its face and neck. Water poured off it, running down the wall. It moved. Fast. Faster than anything should move. 1 second in the window, the next crossing the yard toward my car. I started the engine and floored it. Gravel sprayed as I reversed onto the access road. In my headlights, I saw it clearly for a split second. A woman's face, but wrong. Too wide. Too pale. Eyes too dark. Mouth too full of teeth. Then I was on the main road, driving way too fast on wet pavement, hands clenched on the steering wheel. I didn't slow down until I hit the highway. I called the police once I had cell service. They took a report but didn't sound convinced. They said they'd check it out in the morning. I drove straight to Mike's house. He let me in without questions when he saw my face. I slept on his couch with all the lights on. The police called the next day. They'd found the broken window, wet footprints in the bedroom, but no sign of anyone. They blamed vandals. The rental company apologized and refunded my money. They mentioned the cabin had been empty since the last renters drowned in the lake 3 months ago. A young couple. The woman's body was never found. I dream about it sometimes. That pale face in my headlights. Those dark eyes. That wrong smile. But what haunts me most are the footprints, leading from the deep water straight to where I slept. Like something knew exactly where I was. Like it had been watching me from under that dark surface all along. I don't go near lakes anymore. I keep my windows locked, even in summer. And sometimes, late at night when it's raining, I swear I hear wet footsteps on my fire escape. Slap, 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 then scratching at my window. The first knock came at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. 3 sharp raps against my bedroom floor directly beneath my bed. I rolled over, pulled the pillow over my head, and tried to go back to sleep. The second set of knocks came 5 minutes later, then again, and again. That was 6 weeks ago. Now I haven't slept properly in over a month. I've lost my job and I'm starting to question my own sanity. But I need to write this down, to document exactly what happened, even if no one ever believes me. I've lived in the Parkview Apartments on 47th Street for 3 years. It's nothing special. A converted office building from the 1970s, 12 floors of identical one-bedroom units with thin walls and temperamental heating. But the rent was reasonable, and the location was perfect for my commute to the advertising agency where I worked. Where I used to work. That first night after the knocking kept me awake until sunrise. I went down to the management office as soon as it opened. Mrs. Chen, the building manager, was at her desk doing a crossword puzzle when I walked in. Someone in 511 kept me up all night with constant knocking, I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. Can you please talk to them about noise complaints? Mrs. Chen looked up from her puzzle, frowning. 511? That unit has been empty since December. Previous tenant moved out suddenly, left owing 2 months' rent. 2 months' rent. I stood there for a moment, processing this. That's impossible. I heard knocking coming from directly below my apartment all night long. You want to see for yourself? She pulled a ring of keys from her desk drawer. Come. We took the elevator to the 5th floor. The hallway was identical to mine. Same bland beige carpet, same flickering fluorescent lights, same numbered doors spaced evenly along both walls. Mrs. Chen stopped at 511 and unlocked the door. The apartment was completely empty. No furniture, no boxes, nothing on the walls. Just bare white walls and worn carpet with rectangular indentations showing where furniture had once stood. A thin layer of dust covered the kitchen counter. See? Mrs. Chen gestured around the space. Nobody here since December. Maybe you heard pipes? Building is old. Makes funny noises sometimes. I walked through each room looking for any sign of recent occupancy. The bedroom was directly under mine. I could tell from the layout, which mirrored my own apartment. Nothing but dust and silence. I guess it must have been the pipes, I said finally, though I knew what I'd heard wasn't pipes. The knocks had been too deliberate, too rhythmic. But what else could I say? That night, the knocking started again at exactly 3:17 a.m. 3 sharp raps, directly beneath my bed. I lay there, heart pounding, waiting for the next set. 5 minutes later, right on schedule, 3 more knocks. I got out of bed and pressed my ear to the floor. The knocks were coming from immediately below, from the empty apartment. I grabbed my phone and started recording, determined to document the sound. But when I played back the recording, there was nothing but silence. The next morning, I filed another complaint with Mrs. Chen. She called maintenance, who spent an hour checking the pipes and ventilation system. They found nothing unusual. The third night, I decided to wait in the hallway outside Unit 511. I brought a folding chair from my apartment and set up directly in front of the door at 3 a.m. My plan was simple: catch whoever was somehow getting into the apartment to make the noise. At 3:17 a.m., I heard it. 3 clear knocks. But they weren't coming from inside the apartment. They were coming from above me, from my own unit. I ran upstairs and unlocked my door with shaking hands. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it, completely empty. I started keeping a log after that, documenting every incident. Night 4, knocking from below again. Tried recording with professional audio equipment borrowed from work. Nothing shows up on recordings. Night 5, knocked back. 3 sharp raps against my floor in response to the sounds. Immediate silence followed for 47 minutes. Then resumed, louder than before. Night 6, called police to report potential break-in. Officers searched Unit 511, found no signs of entry, no disturbance to dust patterns on floor. Suggested I see a doctor about stress and possible auditory hallucinations. The lack of sleep started affecting my work. I began missing deadlines, zoning out during client meetings. My boss called me into his office after I fell asleep during an important presentation. "Take some time off," he said. "Get some rest. Come back when you're feeling more yourself." But I couldn't rest. The knocking continued every night, always starting at exactly 3:17 a.m. I tried sleeping pills, white noise machines, earplugs. Nothing helped. I could feel the vibrations through my mattress, through my bones. After 2 weeks, I stopped going to work entirely. Stopped answering calls from my boss, my friends, my family. I became obsessed with solving the mystery. I set up cameras in my apartment and in the hallway outside 511. I installed motion sensors and infrared detectors. I covered the floor of my bedroom with a layer of fine flour, hoping to document footprints or disturbances. Nothing. The knocking continued, but none of my equipment detected anything unusual. The flour remained undisturbed. The cameras showed empty rooms and silent hallways. I started spending my days researching the building's history, looking for any deaths or accidents that might explain the phenomenon. The structure had originally been offices for an insurance company before being converted to apartments in the early 1980s. No records of deaths during construction, no mysterious disappearances, nothing that would explain what was happening. 4 weeks in, I noticed the pattern changing. The knocking still started at 3:17 a.m., but now it would sometimes continue until noon the next day. The intervals between knocks grew shorter. The sound itself became harder, more insistent. I stopped sleeping in my bedroom, trying to camp out in the living room instead. But I could still hear it, still feel it. The sound seemed to follow me through the apartment, always seemingly coming from directly beneath wherever I tried to rest. I started seeing things in my peripheral vision, dark shapes moving just out of sight. But when I turned to look, nothing was there. Sleep deprivation, I told myself. Just sleep deprivation playing tricks on my mind. Last week I broke into Unit 511. I'm not proud of it, but I was desperate. I waited until Mrs. Chen left for the day, then used a credit card to jimmy the lock, a trick I'd learned from YouTube videos during one of my sleepless research binges. The apartment was exactly as it had been before. Empty, dusty, silent. I sat in the middle of the bedroom floor, directly beneath where my bed would be in my apartment above. And I waited. Hours passed. The sun set. The room grew dark. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I heard it, 3 sharp knocks. But they weren't coming from below me anymore. They were coming from above, from my apartment. I ran upstairs, burst into my unit. Empty, silent. I ran back down to 511. As soon as I opened the door, 3 knocks sounded from my apartment again. This continued for hours, the sound always coming from whichever apartment I wasn't in at the moment. That's when I noticed something else, something that made my blood run cold. The dust patterns on the floor of 511. I had disturbed them when I entered, left clear footprints and marks where I had sat. But now, looking more closely in the beam of my flashlight, I saw other marks in the dust. Hundreds of them. Footprints overlapping footprints, creating complex patterns across the floor. Some appeared to be my size and shape. Others were different, smaller, larger, distorted. And they were all fresh. The dust was disturbed in real time, new prints appearing even as I watched, spreading out from where I stood like ripples in a pond. But I was standing completely still. I fled the building that night, packed a bag and checked into a motel across town. But even here, I can hear it. 3 sharp knocks, every night at 3:17 a.m. coming from the room below mine. I've checked. There is no room below mine. I'm on the first floor. Yesterday, I received an eviction notice from Mrs. Chen. Apparently, other tenants have been complaining about noise coming from my apartment, loud knocking sounds at all hours of the day and night. According to them, it's been going on for months, even during the weeks I haven't been there. I'm writing this now from the motel room. It's 3:16 a.m., 1 minute until the knocking starts again. But this time something is different. This time I can see marks appearing in the carpet, subtle indentations like footprints moving slowly across the floor toward my bed. The carpet fibers are being pressed down by something I cannot see, something that leaves no shadow. And for the first time in 6 weeks, I think I understand what's been happening. The knocking wasn't coming from the apartment below or above or anywhere else in the physical world. The knocking was coming from somewhere else entirely, somewhere that operates on different rules than our reality. And whatever was knocking, I think it finally found a way in. The indentations in the carpet are getting closer now. 3 feet from my bed, 2 feet, 1 foot. It's 3:17 a.m. I hear knocking, but this time, it's not coming from below. It's coming from inside this room. I first noticed him 3 weeks ago. It was around 2 a.m. at Joey's all-night diner, where I'd been eating my late dinners after my night shift at the hospital. He sat in the last booth, pressed against the wall, wearing a brown tweed jacket and a red tie that looked like it came from the 1970s. His posture was perfect, rigid, with both hands flat on the table. At first, I didn't think much of it. Lots of strange people come to 24-hour diners in the middle of the night. I'm one of them. But then I noticed he was there the next night, and the next. Always in the same booth, wearing the exact same clothes in the exact same position. I work as an ER nurse, and my shift ends at 1:30 a.m. The diner is just 2 blocks from the hospital, and it's become my routine to stop there before heading home. The food isn't great, but it's hot, and after dealing with emergencies for 12 hours straight, I need something familiar and steady. That third night, I watched him more carefully. He never moved, never ordered food, never drank water, just sat there, hands flat on the table, staring straight ahead. The waitresses walked past him like he wasn't even there. "Hey, Mary," I called to the waitress who usually served me. She was in her 50s with graying hair and comfortable shoes that squeaked against the linoleum floor. "What's the deal with the guy in the back booth?" Mary looked where I pointed, then back at me with a confused expression. "Which guy, honey?" "The one in the brown jacket. Been here every night this week." She turned again, squinting. "I don't see anyone back there, Jake. You want more coffee?" I looked at the booth. The man sat there, clear as day, his red tie a bright splash of color against the beige wall. "You're telling me you don't see him? Right there?" Mary's face changed. Her usual friendly smile disappeared. "Don't," she said. "Just don't." She walked away, leaving my coffee cup empty. I pulled out my phone and tried to take a picture. The screen showed an empty booth. I took another. Same result. My hands started to sweat. The next night I chose a different booth, one with a direct view of him. My fork shook slightly as I ate my meatloaf. The man's face was unremarkable, middle-aged, clean-shaven, with neat brown hair combed to the side. His eyes looked straight ahead, never blinking. I started taking notes on my phone. Every night he appeared at exactly 2:13 a.m. Before that, the booth was empty. I never saw him enter. He was just suddenly there, like someone had switched on a projection. One night I decided to sit in the booth right next to his. My heart pounded as I slid into the seat. This close I could see every detail of his clothing. The tweed jacket had a small tear on the left elbow. The red tie had a faint stain near the bottom. His hands were pale with neatly trimmed fingernails. He didn't smell like anything. No cologne, no body odor, nothing. The air around him felt colder, but maybe that was just my imagination. "Can you hear me?" I whispered. No response. Not even a twitch. I reached out, my hand shaking, and tried to touch his sleeve. My fingers passed through the fabric like it was made of smoke. A cold sensation shot up my arm, and I jerked back, knocking over my water glass. The crash drew stares from other customers. When I looked back, the man was still there, unmoved, unresponsive. I started staying later, waiting to see if he ever left. He didn't. At exactly 5:47 a.m., he would vanish. No movement, no fade out, just there 1 second and gone the next. My co-workers at the hospital noticed something was wrong. I was distracted during shifts, making small mistakes. The head nurse pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay. I said I wasn't sleeping well. It wasn't a lie. I tried different approaches. One night I brought a thermal camera I borrowed from the hospital's maintenance department. Through its screen, the booth was empty. An EMF meter showed no readings. A digital voice recorder picked up nothing but the normal sounds of the diner. I searched local news archives online. Nothing about deaths at the diner. No missing persons matching his description. I even asked the diner's owner, an old Greek man named Stavros, about the history of the place. 32 years I own this place, he said. Nothing strange, nothing bad, just good food, good business. He looked at me hard. You should eat somewhere else for a while, I think. But I couldn't stay away. The man had become an obsession. I needed to understand what he was, why he was there. My sleep schedule fell apart completely. Even when I wasn't at the diner, I thought about him constantly. I started scanning crowds for his brown tweed jacket and red tie. One night, about 2 weeks in, something changed. I was in my usual booth, pretending to read news on my phone while watching him. At exactly 3:33 a.m., his head turned. Slowly, mechanically, like a security camera, until he faced me directly. His eyes were brown, normal looking, but as I stared into them, I felt a pressure building in my head. The diner's fluorescent lights seemed to brighten until they were blinding. The normal sounds, clinking plates, murmured conversations, the hum of the refrigerator, grew louder and louder until they became a deafening roar. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white. The man's mouth opened, revealing normal teeth, a normal tongue, but the sound that came out wasn't normal at all. It was like static and whispers and screaming all at once. I ran out of the diner. Drove home way too fast. Spent the rest of the night sitting in my bathroom with the lights on, jumping at every sound. I didn't go back for 3 days. Ordered delivery instead, ate at my apartment. But the whole time, I felt watched. The darkness in the corners of my bedroom seemed deeper than usual. Every reflection in every window looked wrong somehow. When I finally returned to the diner, he was there. Same position, same clothes, same blank stare ahead. Like nothing had happened. Mary refused to serve my section anymore. A younger waitress named Tanya took over. She was new and didn't know about the man in the booth. But after a few nights, I noticed her taking longer routes to avoid passing near him. I started talking to the other late-night regulars. Most of them were like me, hospital workers, security guards, taxi drivers, people whose lives happened while the rest of the world slept. None of them would acknowledge the man in the brown jacket, but I noticed how they all chose seats far from the back booth, how their eyes skipped over that section of the diner like it was hidden behind a curtain. Last night, something new happened. I was picking at a slice of apple pie, stealing glances at him like usual when the lights flickered, just for a second. In that moment of darkness, I saw him standing right next to my booth. When the lights came back on, he was in his usual spot. But now there was something on my table that hadn't been there before. A small, rectangular business card. The paper was yellowed with age. In faded type, it showed a name and phone number. Thomas Reeves Insurance Adjuster, 555. Number 2. My hand shook as I picked it up. The card felt real, solid. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. A recorded message played. The number you have dialed is not in service and has been disconnected. I flipped the card over. On the back, in neat handwriting. Booth 7, October 15th, 1986, 3:47 a.m. That was yesterday. I've spent all day researching. Thomas Reeves was real. He worked for Midwest Life Insurance from 1975 to 1986. And on October 15th, 1986, he died of a heart attack at Joey's all-night diner. In booth 7, it's 1:45 a.m. now. I'm sitting in my car in the diner's parking lot, watching the neon open sign buzz and flicker. My shift ended 15 minutes ago. My stomach is growling. I haven't eaten since lunch. The diner's windows are bright rectangles in the darkness. From here, I can just see the back booth. It's empty. I know I should drive home, order a pizza, try to sleep, start looking for somewhere else to eat after my shifts. But I'm going to go in. I need to know why he showed himself to me, why he gave me the card, what he wants. The diner's door chimes as I push it open. Mary won't meet my eyes as I walk to my usual booth. My watch shows 2:12 a.m. 1 minute until he appears. I can feel the cold already. I didn't want to go down to that basement. The superintendent had asked me 3 times already to help clear out the old storage room, and I'd made excuses every time. But when he caught me in the lobby yesterday and mentioned he'd start charging a fee for unused storage spaces, I knew I had to deal with it. The basement of my apartment building stank of mold and old paper. My footsteps echoed against the concrete floor as I made my way past the rusted metal storage cages. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering every few seconds. Unit B14 was mine. The numbers were barely visible under decades of grime. The padlock was stuck. I had to yank it 3 times before it opened with a sharp crack that bounced off the walls. Inside, cardboard boxes were stacked to the ceiling. Some had collapsed, spilling yellowed papers across the floor. The air felt thick and stale. I grabbed the closest box and sneezed as dust flew up. The cardboard crumbled in my hands. Inside were building records, maintenance logs from the 1980s, old lease agreements, notices about rent increases, useless junk that should have been thrown out years ago. The next box was the same, and the next. I worked my way through the pile, creating 2 stacks. Trash and more trash. My back started to ache from bending over. Sweat ran down my neck despite the basement's chill. Then I found the tenant registry. It was a thick leather-bound book, its spine cracked and pages warped from moisture. I sat on an overturned milk crate and opened it, more out of boredom than interest. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, listing names, apartment numbers, and dates going back to the 1960s. I flipped through randomly, scanning the entries. My eyes stopped on a page from 1974. There, in faded blue ink, was my name, Daniel Thomas Miller, Unit 4B. My heart jumped. I read it again. Daniel Thomas Miller, my exact name, middle name included. That wasn't possible. I was born in 1985. I'd only moved into this building 2 years ago. But there it was, my full name, written 50 years ago. I checked the rest of the entry. Move-in date, March 15th, 1974. Length of tenancy, 8 months. Reason for departure, left without notice. My hands were shaking. I turned the page, looking for more information, but there was nothing else about this other Daniel Miller. Just more names and dates. I pulled out my phone and opened the flashlight app, shining it close to the page. The writing was clear, no mistaking those letters. I took a photo, then another. The flash illuminated the darkness beyond my storage unit, casting strange shadows on the basement walls. A pipe creaked somewhere in the darkness. I jumped, dropping my phone. It clattered on the concrete. When I picked it up, the screen was cracked. I needed more information. I dug through the remaining boxes with new urgency, ignoring the dust and cobwebs. Most contained similar records, utility bills, repair invoices, complaint forms. In a water-damaged box at the back, I found a stack of Polaroid photos. The first few showed the building's exterior, not much different from today. Then I found one of the lobby from 1974. The furniture was different, but the marble floor and wood-paneled walls were the same. A man stood by the mailboxes, his back to the camera. My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped the photo. The man wore a brown corduroy jacket and had dark hair cut short, exactly like the jacket I'd bought at a vintage store last month, exactly like my hair. I flipped through more photos. Most were too faded or water damaged to make out clearly. Then I found another one of the same man, this time facing the camera. The image was blurry, but I could see his face. My face. I sat there staring at it for a long time. The resemblance was exact. The same nose, same jaw, same slight asymmetry to the eyes. Even the small scar above my right eyebrow where I'd fallen off my bike as a kid. This had to be a mistake, or a prank. Maybe someone had photoshopped these pictures, planted them here as a joke. But the photos were genuine Polaroids, and that handwriting in the registry was decades old. I checked my phone, 11:47 p.m. I'd been in the basement for hours. The superintendent would be asleep by now. I needed to talk to someone who'd been in the building a long time. Mrs. Chen in 2A had lived here since the 1960s. I'd helped her carry groceries a few times. She was always up late watching Korean dramas. I gathered the registry and photos, shut the storage unit, and headed for the stairs. The basement seemed darker now. The fluorescent lights cast strange shadows that moved when I wasn't looking directly at them. My footsteps sounded wrong, like they were slightly out of sync with my movements. I was halfway to the stairs when I heard it. Another set of footsteps, coming from the darkness behind me. I stopped. The steps continued for a fraction of a second before stopping too. My heart pounded against my ribs. I turned around slowly. The basement stretched into darkness beyond the reach of the flickering lights. Empty storage units gaped like open mouths. "Hello?" My voice cracked. No response. I walked faster, trying not to run. The footsteps behind me started again, faster too. I reached the stairs and took them 2 at a time. The registry clutched to my chest. Behind me, the steps echoed off the concrete. I burst into the lobby, gasping. A lamp on the reception desk provided the only light. The footsteps had stopped. I stood there catching my breath, feeling stupid. Old buildings made noise. Everyone knew that. Mrs. Chen's door was dark. A note taped to it said she was visiting family in Taiwan. I cursed under my breath. Back in my apartment, I spread the photos on my kitchen table. They looked different under normal lighting. Older, more faded. But the man's face was still unmistakably mine. I opened my laptop and searched the building's address plus Daniel Miller, 1974. Nothing relevant came up. I tried variations. Dan Miller, D.T. Miller, Danny Miller. Just pages of social media profiles and white pages listings. The registry had a phone number listed for the other Daniel Miller. I dialed it, not expecting anything. A recorded message said the number was no longer in service. I searched my own name plus 1974 and found hundreds of Daniel Millers. None matched the details I was looking for. I checked birth and death records, newspaper archives, anything I could think of. At 3 a.m., my eyes burning from staring at the screen, I found something. A small article in the local paper from November 1974. Police are seeking information regarding the disappearance of Daniel Miller, 35, last seen at his residence at my building's address on October 12th. Miller was reported missing by his employer after failing to appear at work for 2 weeks. Anyone with information is asked to contact. The article included a photo. It was grainy and black and white, but it showed the same man from the Polaroids. Me. I read the article again. October 1974. The registry said I, had moved out in November. Left without notice. My head was pounding. None of this made sense. I needed sleep. I'd go through the rest of the storage unit tomorrow, find some explanation that would make this all seem stupid in daylight. I got ready for bed, double-checking the locks on my door and windows. As I brushed my teeth, I avoided looking at my reflection in the medicine cabinet mirror. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that Polaroid image of my face from 1974. The building creaked and settled around me. Each sound made me tense up, listening for footsteps. At 4:13 a.m., someone knocked on my door. I lay perfectly still, holding my breath. 3 more knocks, slow and deliberate. Then a voice called out, my voice, exactly as it sounds on recordings. I know you found the photos, Danny. My throat closed up. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. We need to talk about what happened in 1974. The doorknob rattled. I watched it start to turn, even though I knew I'd locked it. The door began to open. A shape stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the hall light. It wore a brown corduroy jacket. As it stepped into my apartment, I saw its face. My face, but wrong somehow. The features were exact, but the expression was all wrong. It smiled at me. My smile, but not mine at all. Time works differently in the basement, it said in my voice. I've been waiting a long time to meet myself. I scrambled back against the headboard. It took another step forward. Don't worry, it said. This will only take about 8 months. My back hit the wall. There was nowhere else to go. It reached out with my hand, wearing my father's old watch, the one I'd lost 2 weeks ago. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I was standing in the basement. The registry lay open at my feet, turned to a blank page. A pen waited next to it. My hands, but not my hands, picked up the pen and began to write. Daniel Thomas Miller, Unit 4B, move-in date, March 15th, 2024. I tried to stop, but my fingers kept moving across the paper. The ink was blue, already starting to fade. The basement hummed with the sound of ancient pipes and flickering lights. Somewhere in the darkness, footsteps echoed, coming closer. Always closer. And I understood finally why that other Daniel Miller had left without notice in 1974, just as I would leave without notice in 2024, after exactly 8 months, just as I always had and always would. The footsteps grew louder. I turned to face myself again. I didn't put that key in my pocket. I know I didn't. But there it was on Tuesday morning when I reached into my coat to grab my phone, a heavy brass key, about 3 inches long, with an ornate head and worn teeth. The metal felt cold against my fingers, and a thin layer of grime came off on my skin when I touched it. I stood there in the lobby of Morton and Burke Publishing, where I'd worked as an editor for the past 8 years, staring at this thing I'd never seen before. Other employees rushed past me toward the elevators, their shoes clicking on the marble floor. The security guard, Bill, gave me an odd look from his desk. "Everything okay, Mr. Parker?" I quickly shoved the key back in my pocket. "Yeah, fine. Just checking something." The weight of it stayed with me all day as I sat in my cubicle on the 14th floor, editing manuscripts about true crime and self-help. Every so often, I'd slip my hand into my coat pocket just to make sure it was still there. It was always there, like a small chunk of ice that never seemed to warm up. I thought about asking around the office if anyone had lost a key, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way it looked, too old to belong in our modern glass and steel building. Or maybe it was the fact that I couldn't shake the feeling that it had appeared in my pocket, rather than being misplaced there. That night I took it home and put it on my nightstand. The next morning it was still there, catching the early sunlight. I picked it up and noticed more details. Tiny scratches in the metal, a pattern of crosses on the head, and what looked like the number 7 stamped near the tip. My fingers left fresh smudges on its dull surface. I brought it back to work with me. Don't ask me why. It just felt important, like something I shouldn't leave behind. For 3 days, it rode in my pocket while I went about my normal routine. Coffee from the cart in the lobby, manuscript reviews, lunch at my desk, meetings in conference room B, more coffee, more manuscripts. On Friday, I had to stay late to finish evaluating a promising thriller submission. The office was almost empty by 7 p.m. The fluorescent lights hummed. Computer screens glowed in the darkness of vacant cubicles. My eyes burned from staring at my monitor. I needed to stretch my legs, so I took a walk around the floor. That's when I noticed it. A door I'd never seen before, tucked into an alcove behind the supply room. The paint matched the walls exactly, but it looked older than the rest of the building's doors. No nameplate, no window, just a keyhole with brass fittings that had turned green with age. My heart started beating faster. The key felt heavy in my pocket. I looked around. The floor was silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. No one else was around. I took out the key and held it up to the keyhole. The worn brass matched perfectly. My hands shook as I inserted it. The key slid in smoothly, like it was coming home. When I turned it, the mechanism made a sound like bones breaking. The door opened with a soft groan. Cool air rushed out, carrying a musty smell that reminded me of old books and deeper places. Beyond the threshold was absolute darkness. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam revealed a narrow corridor with walls of rough stone. The floor sloped down slightly. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. Common sense said to close the door, go back to my desk, and forget about this. But I'd been editing other people's adventures for 8 years. Maybe it was time to have one of my own. I stepped through. The door clicked shut behind me. I spun around, heart hammering, but it was still there. The key was still in the lock. I left it there. No way was I risking getting trapped. The corridor stretched ahead, curving slightly to the left. My phone's light created shifting shadows on the walls. The air felt thick and stale, like no one had breathed it in years. My footsteps echoed on the stone floor. After about 50 feet, the passage opened into a circular room about 20 feet across. My light revealed more doorways, 3 of them evenly spaced around the walls. Each one was identical to the first, complete with brass fittings gone green with age. I approached the nearest door and tried the handle. Locked. Same with the second one. But the third door, the handle turned with a grinding sound of metal on metal. The room beyond was larger than the first, with a high ceiling lost in darkness. Stone pillars rose from the floor like tree trunks. And there, in the center of the room, stood a desk. Not some ancient artifact, a modern office desk with a computer monitor and a stack of manila folders. A half-empty coffee mug sat next to the keyboard. Steam rose from it. My throat went dry. Someone had been here recently. Maybe they still were. I moved closer to the desk, sweeping my light around. The monitor was on, displaying a document. I leaned in to read it. Project Status Report, Phase 7 Subject, James Parker. Assignment, Editorial Division. Duration, 8 years, 3 months, 12 days. Performance exceeding expectations. Next action, promotion assessment pending notes. Subject shows increased curiosity. Monitoring frequency to be increased. My name, my job, my exact time with the company. The coffee mug had Morton and Burke Publishing printed on the side. A door slammed somewhere behind me. Then another, closer. Footsteps echoed off stone. I killed my phone's light and pressed myself against one of the pillars. The footsteps grew louder. A beam of light swept through the room. "Hello?" A woman's voice called out. "Mr. Parker, we weren't expecting you to find this for another 3 months." I stayed silent, trying to control my breathing. The light moved closer. "It's all right," she continued. "This is all part of the process. Everyone finds their way down here eventually. We just need to talk about your promotion." The beam found me, blinding me. I raised my hand to shield my eyes. "There you are." The voice was closer now. "I'm Helen from HR. Why don't you come with me? There's quite a lot to explain." My eyes adjusted. The woman holding the flashlight wore a normal business suit. She looked exactly like someone from HR would look. But something was off about her smile. "What is this place?" I managed to ask. My voice sounded strange in the stone room. "This is where we monitor employee development," Helen said. "We find it's better than traditional performance reviews, more organic. The key appears when an employee is ready for advancement, though you found yours a bit ahead of schedule." The key just appeared in my pocket. "Yes, that's how it works. We have various methods of delivery. The important thing is that you're here now, ready to take the next step." She gestured toward one of the doors. "Shall we discuss your future with the company?" I looked back at the monitor, at my name on the screen, then at the coffee mug still steaming, then at Helen's too perfect smile. "I think," I said carefully, "I need to think about this." Her smile didn't waver. "Of course, take all the time you need, but you should know, now that you've found this place, things will be different. They always are." I backed away toward the door I'd come through. Helen didn't move to stop me. She just stood there smiling as I fumbled for the key and practically ran back up the corridor. When I burst out into the normal office, everything looked exactly the same. Fluorescent lights, empty cubicles, my coffee cup still sitting on my desk where I'd left it. I glanced back at the door, half expecting it to have vanished, but it was there, solid and real. The key was cool in my hand. That was 3 days ago. I still have the key. I haven't gone back through the door, but I know it's there. Every morning when I arrive at work, I take a different route to my desk to avoid walking past that alcove. But I can feel it waiting. The strangest part is that everything else is normal. I still edit manuscripts. I still get coffee from the cart in the lobby. Bill, the security guard, still nods hello every morning. But now I notice things I didn't before. Like how the cleaning crew never seems to work on our floor, but every morning everything is spotless. How certain employees disappear for hours at a time with no explanation. How Helen from HR sometimes walks past my desk and gives me that same perfect smile. Yesterday I found a memo on my desk. Standard corporate letterhead, but no signature. Promotional opportunity. Your initiative in exploring company resources is noted and appreciated. Please schedule a follow-up meeting at your earliest convenience. The door is always open. P.S. Keep the key. You'll know when to use it again. I should probably quit. Find a new job editing books that don't make me wonder what's hiding behind their covers. But I won't, because every time I touch that key in my pocket, I feel something I haven't felt in 8 years of corporate life. Anticipation. Helen was right. Things are different now. And maybe that's not entirely bad. This morning I noticed another employee, Sarah from accounting, standing in front of a door I've never seen before, holding a brass key in her shaking hand. Our eyes met. She quickly looked away and hurried off, but I saw the recognition in her face. The same look I see in the mirror every morning now. I wonder how many of us there are, how many doors, how deep the corridors go. But mostly I wonder what's behind those other doors, the locked ones. Because the key in my pocket feels heavier every day, and sometimes when I hold it up to the light, I swear the pattern of crosses on its head has changed. Like it's trying to tell me something. Like maybe it doesn't just open one door anymore. I've started taking walks around different floors of the building during my lunch break, looking for doors that don't quite match the others, watching for brass fittings gone green with age. I know I'll find another one eventually. And when I do, well, Helen said I was exceeding expectations. Maybe it's time to exceed them even more. The key is in my pocket right now as I write this. Cold, heavy, waiting. Tomorrow, I think I'll try a different door. The first time I heard my name on those abandoned railroad tracks, I convinced myself it was just the wind. The second time, I stopped walking. By the third time, my hands were shaking and sweat ran down my back because I knew I was completely alone out there. I hadn't planned to walk the tracks that afternoon. My car broke down on Route 16, about 3 miles outside of Millbrook. The piece of junk Ford finally gave up after warning me for months with its clicking and grinding. The temperature gauge shot into the red zone and steam poured from under the hood. I pulled onto the shoulder, and after 5 minutes of staring at the engine like an idiot, I knew I wouldn't fix it myself. My phone showed no signal, typical for this part of Connecticut. The nearest service station was in Millbrook, and I remembered the old railroad tracks that used to connect to the town. They ran parallel to Route 16, cutting through the woods. Walking along them would be faster than following the winding road. The October air bit through my light jacket. Dead leaves crunched under my boots as I climbed down the embankment from the highway. The tracks lay below, 2 rusty lines stretching into the distance. Weeds grew between the rotting wooden ties. The rails hadn't seen a train in at least 20 years. I checked my watch. 4:47 p.m. If I kept a good pace, I'd reach town before dark. The sun was already low, casting long shadows through the bare trees. My footsteps echoed off the rocks as I walked, the only sound besides the occasional gust of wind. The first hour passed quietly. The tracks curved around hills and through cuts in the rock. My legs started to ache. I wasn't used to walking this far. Sweat dampened my shirt despite the cold air. That's when I heard it. David. The voice came from behind me, quiet but clear. A woman's voice, with an odd flatness to it. I turned around but saw only empty tracks stretching back through the trees. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the still air. No response. I shrugged it off and kept walking, probably just my mind playing tricks. I was tired, and the wind could make strange sounds through the trees. 5 minutes later, David. Louder this time, still flat and emotionless, still behind me. I spun around again, heart pounding. The tracks were empty. The woods were silent. "Is someone there?" I shouted. The words echoed off the rocks. No answer. My hands felt cold and clammy. I wiped them on my jeans and walked faster, boots crunching on the gravel between the ties. David. Right behind me now. So close I could almost feel breath on my neck. I broke into a run. Gravel flew from under my feet. My breathing came in ragged gasps. The voice followed. "David. David. David." Each time closer. Each time flatter. Each time wrong somehow, like a recording played too slowly. I sprinted until my lungs burned. When I finally had to stop, bent over with hands on my knees, the voice was gone. Only my wheezing breath broke the silence. The sun had dropped behind the hills. Long shadows filled the cuts between the rocks. I straightened up, still breathing hard, and looked around. The tracks stretched empty in both directions. My watch read 6:12 p.m. Darkness would fall soon. I had maybe 30 minutes of daylight left. Millbrook couldn't be more than a mile or two ahead. I started walking again, faster than before. The temperature dropped as shadows lengthened. My breath came out in visible puffs. The cooling sweat on my back made me shiver. A twig snapped in the woods to my right. I jerked my head toward the sound, but saw only darkness between the trees. Another snap, to the left this time. Then silence. I walked faster, almost jogging. The gravel crunched too loudly under my feet. Each sound seemed to echo off the rocks. David. I stumbled and nearly fell. The voice came from directly ahead this time. I squinted into the growing darkness. Nothing moved on the tracks. Who's there? My voice cracked. This isn't funny. David, David, David. From behind again, then from the right, then the left, then everywhere at once. A chorus of flat, dead voices calling my name. I ran. Branches whipped my face as I left the tracks, plunging into the woods. I had to get away from those voices, had to reach the road. My foot caught on a root and I sprawled forward. My hands scraped against rocks and dead leaves. Pain shot through my knee. I lay there gasping, face pressed against the cold ground. The voices had stopped. Slowly, I pushed myself up. Blood trickled from scrapes on my palms. My knee throbbed where I'd hit it. Trees loomed around me in the darkness. I had no idea which direction I'd come from. The tracks were hidden somewhere in the growing shadows. My phone still showed no signal. A branch cracked behind me. I whirled around. Nothing there. Just darkness between the trees. Another crack, closer. Then another. Something moved in the shadows. A darker shape against the darkness. I caught a glimpse of pale skin. Wrong somehow. Too white. Too smooth. I ran again. Branches tore at my clothes. Roots tried to trip me. I had no idea where I was going. Just away. Away from whatever was behind me. The ground sloped upward. I scrambled up, grabbing at trees to pull myself higher. My lungs burned. My legs trembled. David! The voice came from above me now. I looked up and screamed. A face hung in the darkness between the trees, pale white with black holes where the eyes should be. The mouth opened too wide, showing teeth that gleamed like metal. David. I lost my footing and tumbled backward down the slope. Rocks and branches battered me as I fell. I hit the bottom hard, driving the air from my lungs. Pain shot through my whole body. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Footsteps crunched in the leaves, coming closer, slow, deliberate. I forced my eyes open. The thing from the slope stood over me. In the last gray light, I could see it clearly now. It looked almost human. Almost. But the proportions were wrong. The arms too long. The fingers too thin. The skin so white it seemed to glow. The face was the worst part. No eyes. Just smooth skin where they should be. The mouth was a jagged line that split the lower face, filled with gleaming metal teeth. It reached for me with those long fingers. David, it said in that flat voice. We've been waiting for you. More shapes emerged from the darkness. More pale faces. More metal teeth. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My body wouldn't move. The first creature's hand touched my face. Its skin felt like cold plastic. Time to come home, David. The others moved closer, surrounding me. Their hands reached down. Cold plastic fingers pressed against my skin. No, I managed to whisper. Please. We've missed you, David, they said in unison, voices flat and dead. We've missed you so much. They lifted me from the ground. I couldn't fight, couldn't even move. Their cold hands held me as they carried me into the darkness. I saw the railroad tracks one last time, gleaming faintly in the distance. Then the shadows swallowed everything. I don't know how long they carried me. Time seemed to stop in the darkness. My body felt numb. Only their cold hands against my skin told me I was still alive. We went down into the earth through tunnels that shouldn't exist. The air grew colder, damper. It smelled of wet stone and decay. Lights appeared ahead. Not electric lights, some kind of pale blue glow that seemed to come from the walls themselves. It illuminated a vast underground space. More of them waited there. Dozens, hundreds. All those eyeless faces turned toward me as they carried me past. "Welcome home," they said together. Their voices echoed off the stone walls. They took me to a chamber deep underground. Machines lined the walls. Old machines, covered in rust and grime. But they hummed with power. Cables and tubes snaked across the floor. In the center stood something like an operating table. Metal restraints hung from its sides. "No," I said again. My voice was barely a whisper. "Please don't." They lifted me onto the cold metal surface. The restraints snapped closed around my wrists and ankles. More bands wrapped around my chest and head, holding me completely immobile. One of them leaned over me. Its mouth split open, showing those terrible metal teeth. "Don't worry, David," it said. "Soon you'll be just like us. Soon you'll understand." Something whirred above me. A machine descended from the ceiling, all sharp edges and gleaming needles. "We've waited so long for you to come back," they said. "Now we can make you perfect, make you pure, make you one of us." The needles touched my skin. Pain exploded through my body. I screamed until my voice gave out. Screamed as they cut away what made me human. Screamed as they replaced flesh with metal and plastic. When it was over, I stood before a mirror they'd brought. An eyeless face looked back at me. Pale white skin stretched over metal bones. A mouth full of steel teeth. "Welcome home, brother," they said. "Welcome home," I replied in a flat, empty voice. Now I walk the tracks at night. I call out to lost travelers with voices that used to be mine. I guide them down into the darkness where my brothers and sisters wait. Sometimes they scream, sometimes they beg, but in the end they all become pure. They all become perfect. Like me. I am David. I am home. And I have work to do. The tracks are calling again. Someone is walking alone in the growing darkness. Someone who needs to be made perfect. I open my steel mouth and call their name. The first letter arrived 3 days after I moved in. Plain white envelope, my name and address printed clearly on the front. James Miller, 742 Oakwood Heights, apartment 3B, Portland, Oregon. But I hadn't sent it, and it was addressed to someone I'd never heard of. I stood in my half-unpacked living room, cardboard boxes still scattered around my feet, and turned the envelope over in my hands. The paper felt expensive, heavy between my fingers. My stomach tightened as I read the return address again. Same building, same apartment, my name. I ripped it open. "Dear Sarah, I know it's been 15 years. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. But I need to tell you what really happened that night. What I did. What I saw." The letter stopped there. Just those 3 sentences typed in crisp Times New Roman. No signature. The paper trembled in my hands and I realized my fingers were shaking. I dropped the letter on my kitchen counter and went back to unpacking. The rental company hadn't mentioned any previous tenants named Sarah, and I hadn't asked. The apartment had been empty for 6 months before I moved in. That's what the agent told me. Recently renovated, fresh paint on the walls, new appliances, a clean slate. That night I couldn't sleep. The letter sat on my counter like a splinter under my skin. I got up at 3 a.m. and read it again. The paper felt cold against my fingertips. My name on the envelope, my address, but I hadn't sent it. The second letter came 2 days later. Same envelope, same expensive paper. My hands were steady this time as I tore it open. "Sarah, I watched you leave that night. Saw you walk down Palmer Street in your red coat, the streetlights making your hair shine. I followed you. You never knew I was there. I saw everything. I called the post office the next morning. The woman on the phone sounded bored as she explained that, yes, they delivered all mail with the correct address, regardless of who sent it. But it has my name as the sender, I said. I didn't send it. Sir, we just deliver the mail, she replied. If you're having an issue with harassment, you should contact the police. I hung up and Googled Sarah plus Palmer Street, Portland, thousands of results. I spent 2 hours scrolling through social media profiles and news articles. Nothing stood out. The third letter arrived on a Sunday. The mail carrier had pushed it under my door. This time my hands shook so badly I had to set the envelope down on my coffee table and take 3 deep breaths before opening it. Sarah, the police got it wrong. They think they know what happened, but they don't. I've carried this secret for 15 years. Every night I see your face. Every night I hear your scream. I'm the only one who knows the truth. I drove to the police station that afternoon. The officer at the front desk looked tired as I explained about the letters. He took notes, nodded, asked if I felt threatened. No, I said, but someone's using my name to send these letters, and something happened 15 years ago, something bad. He typed on his computer. Nothing comes up for Palmer Street 15 years ago, he said. No major incidents. Could be someone playing a prank. With my name? He shrugged. File a report if you want. Not much we can do without more to go on. I spent that night sitting by my window, watching the street below. Cars passed. People walked their dogs. A couple argued outside the convenience store on the corner. Normal Sunday night stuff. But my skin felt too tight, like it didn't fit right anymore. The fourth letter came on Wednesday. This time I opened it standing in the lobby next to my mailbox. Sarah, I see you got a new job. The coffee shop on 12th Street. You look good in that green apron. Your hair is shorter now, but I'd recognize you anywhere. 15 years, and you haven't aged a day. My hands went numb. I dropped the letter. A neighbor picked it up, handed it back with a smile. I forced myself to smile back, took the elevator to my floor, locked my door, and slid down against it until I hit the floor. There was a coffee shop on 12th Street. I'd passed it on my way to work. The baristas wore green aprons. I called in sick the next day and went to the coffee shop. Sat in a corner table for 4 hours, watching the baristas. 3 women worked the morning shift. None of them looked like they could have been involved in anything 15 years ago. They were all too young. The 5th letter arrived the next day. Sarah, why did you change your name? I saw your name tag. Kate, that's not who you are. I know who you are. I know what you did. I went back to the coffee shop, watched the baristas again. One of them wore a name tag that said Kate. She looked about 25, dark hair cut in a bob, quick smile, efficient hands on the espresso machine. I ordered a coffee. When she handed it to me, I studied her face. She smiled, already turning to the next customer. Have you worked here long? I asked. About 6 months, she said. Another smile, distracted. Ever lived on Palmer Street? Her smile disappeared. She stepped back from the counter. Do I know you? No, sorry. Just making conversation. I left my coffee on the counter and walked out. That night, someone knocked on my door at 2 a.m. I looked through the peephole. Empty hallway. Another knock. I opened the door. The hallway light flickered. No one there. But on the floor, an envelope. My hands shook as I picked it up. Same paper, same address. My name as the sender. But this time, the letter inside was different. James, I know you're reading my letters to Sarah. Stop looking for her. This isn't your story. Go back to your life. Forget about Palmer Street. Forget about what happened 15 years ago. Or you'll find out firsthand why Sarah had to disappear. I slept with the lights on that night. In the morning, I called the rental agency. Did someone named Sarah live in my apartment before me? Sir, we can't disclose previous tenant information. Please, it's important. A pause. Keyboard clicking. That unit was empty for 6 months before you moved in. Before that, let me check. No Sarah listed. Previous tenant was a Robert Chen. Lived there 4 years. I hung up and Googled missing persons cases from 15 years ago. Spent hours scrolling through databases. Found 3 Sarahs who had disappeared in Oregon. None in Portland. None on Palmer Street. The 7th letter came the next day. Just 3 words. Stop looking, James. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. Sat by my window with all the lights off, watching the street. Cars passed. People walked. Normal life going on while my world twisted sideways. On the 3rd night, I saw someone standing on the corner under my window. Just standing there looking up at my apartment. When I pressed my face against the glass to see better, they walked away. But slowly, like they wanted me to see them go. The 8th letter arrived in my work email. Somehow they'd found my address. Same font, same message style. James, I warned you. Now you're involved. Meet me at Palmer Street tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Come alone. You want to know the truth about Sarah? This is your chance. I deleted the email, restored it, read it again, deleted it again. At 9:45 p.m. the next night, I parked my car a block from Palmer Street. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The street looked normal. Houses with lights on. Cars parked along the curb. A cat slinking along a fence. At 9:55, I got out of the car. My legs felt wooden. Each step echoed in my head. Palmer Street was empty. I checked my phone. 10 p.m. exactly. A figure stepped out of the shadows. Tall, male, face hidden under a hood. James Miller, he said. Not a question. I nodded. You've been looking for Sarah. Who are you? He took a step closer. Someone who knows the truth. About what happened 15 years ago. About what's happening now. Another step. Sarah isn't dead, James. She's hiding. And now you've drawn attention to her. Made people start asking questions again. What people? He laughed. The sound scraped against my ears. The kind of people who make other people disappear. A car turned onto Palmer Street, headlights sweeping across us. When the light faded, he was gone. The 9th letter waited in my mailbox the next morning. James, you met him last night. Now you understand. Some stories should stay buried. Some truths are better left unknown. Sarah understood that. That's why she disappeared. Go back to your life. Forget about the letters. Forget about Sarah. This is your last warning. I packed a bag that night. Booked a hotel across town. As I walked to my car, a woman stepped out of the shadows by the building entrance. Kate? I said. She wasn't wearing her green apron now. Her face looked harder in the streetlight. My name isn't Kate, she said. Sarah. She shook her head. Sarah's gone, has been for 15 years. You need to let this go. But the letters were a warning. Someone noticed you asking questions. The wrong people noticed. Who? She looked over her shoulder. I have to go. Don't try to find me again. Don't try to find Sarah. Just live your life, James. While you still can. She walked away. I watched until she disappeared around the corner. When I got to my car, an envelope sat on the driver's seat. My window wasn't broken, the doors were still locked. Inside, one sentence. Some stories end with a warning. This is yours. I drove to the hotel, checked in under a false name, sat on the bed and stared at the wall until sunrise. The next day, I gave notice at my job, called the rental agency and told them I was breaking my lease, packed everything I owned into my car. As I drove out of Portland, heading east with no real destination in mind, my phone buzzed. Email from an address I didn't recognize. Smart choice, James. Some mysteries should stay mysteries. Some stories should stay untold. Drive safe. Don't look back. I deleted the email, turned off my phone, kept driving. That was 2 months ago. I'm in another city now. New job, new apartment. The letters stopped. But sometimes, late at night, I think about Sarah. About what happened 15 years ago on Palmer Street. About the truth buried under all those warnings. And I check my mailbox every morning with shaking hands, waiting for another envelope with my name as the sender. So far, nothing. But every time I see someone in a red coat or pass a coffee shop with green-aproned baristas, or hear footsteps behind me on a dark street, I remember, some stories don't want to be told, some mysteries don't want to be solved, and some warnings should be heeded. I heeded mine. I hope you heed yours. Just forget you read this. Go back to your life. Don't ask questions about Sarah or Palmer Street or what happened 15 years ago. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing isn't the truth. It's the people who want it to stay hidden. The GPS said to turn right. I shouldn't have listened. Now I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere and something's out there in the dark. I've been hearing it for hours. The sounds keep getting closer. But let me start from the beginning. I was driving home from a business meeting in Burlington, Vermont. It was Tuesday, October 12th, around 6 p.m. The sun was already setting, and I wanted to get back to Boston before it got too late. My regular route would take about 4 hours with traffic, but my phone's GPS suggested a shortcut through some back roads that would save me an hour. I pulled into a gas station to fill up before taking the detour. The old guy behind the counter looked at me funny when I mentioned the route. That road? He scratched his beard. Ain't been maintained in years. Nobody goes that way anymore. I laughed it off. GPS says it's still active. Should be fine in my SUV. He shrugged and handed me my receipt. Your call, buddy. Just stick to the main roads after dark. I ignored him. Local folks always had stories about back roads. Besides, my 2023 Range Rover could handle anything. I pulled out of the station and followed the GPS instructions, turning onto a narrow 2-lane road that wound through dense forest. The first hour was fine. The pavement was rough but passable. My phone showed I was making good time. But as the sun disappeared completely, the road got worse. Potholes appeared more frequently. Tree branches scraped against my car's sides. The GPS voice crackled. Turn right in 500 feet. I slowed down and squinted through the darkness. There was a dirt road heading into the trees. No street sign, no markers, just tire tracks disappearing into black forest. My phone lost signal for a moment, then came back. Recalculating. Continue on current route. I should have turned around right then. But the GPS insisted this was still the fastest way, and I was already an hour into the shortcut. Going back would just waste time. The dirt road got narrower. Tree branches closed in overhead, blocking out what little moonlight there was. My headlights caught glimpses of broken fence posts and crumbling stone walls hidden in the undergrowth. Then I saw the house. It was set back from the road about 50 yards, a colonial-style building with peeling white paint and dark windows. Something about it made my skin crawl. As I drove past, I could have sworn I saw a movement behind one of the upstairs windows. Just a quick shadow, there and gone. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The road curved sharply around a hill, and that's when things really went wrong. The tire hit the pothole hard. I heard a loud pop and felt the car lurch to the right. Shit. I fought the wheel as the SUV slid in the mud. The back end fishtailed. I pumped the brakes, but it was too late. The Range Rover slid off the road and into a drainage ditch. The front wheels sank deep into thick black mud. The engine died. No, no, no. I turned the key. The starter whined, but the engine wouldn't catch. I tried again. Nothing. I grabbed my phone. No signal. Okay, Don, don't panic. I talked to myself in the sudden silence. Just get out and check the damage. I opened the door and stepped down. My foot sank ankle deep in cold mud. The beam of my phone's flashlight showed me the bad news. The right front tire was completely shredded, and the car was stuck at an angle in the ditch. Even with 4 good wheels, I'd need a tow truck to get out. I slogged through the mud to check the trunk. I had a spare tire, but it wouldn't help in this situation. What I needed was another vehicle or a winch. The temperature was dropping fast. My breath made clouds in the beam of the flashlight. I could try walking back to the main road, but I had no idea how far that was. In the dark, I'd likely get lost. Better to wait until morning. I had half a tank of gas so I could run the heater if needed. I had some protein bars and water bottles from my business trip. I'd be uncomfortable, but I'd survive the night. I climbed back in and locked the doors. The dashboard clock read 8:47 p.m. That's when I heard the first sound. It was faint, just a crack of a branch in the woods. Probably a deer or raccoon, but something about it made the hair on my neck stand up. I waited, straining my ears. The forest was dead silent. No crickets, no owls, nothing. Another crack, closer this time. Then another. Something was moving through the trees, heading toward the road. I killed my flashlight and sat perfectly still, watching the woods through the windshield. The moon had risen, casting weak light through the branches. Dark shapes shifted in the shadows. A branch snapped right next to the car. My heart hammered against my ribs. I held my breath, trying not to make a sound. A shape moved in my peripheral vision. Something dark passed behind the car. I caught a glimpse in the side mirror. A human-like figure, but wrong somehow. Too tall. Too thin. The temperature inside the car plummeted. My breath came out in white clouds. Frost started forming on the windows. Something scraped against the rear bumper. A sound like fingernails on metal. I wanted to start the engine, to turn on the lights, to do something, but fear held me paralyzed. Every instinct screamed at me to stay still and silent. The scratching moved up the side of the car. I could track its progress by sound, along the rear door, then the front door, then the hood. A shadow fell across the windshield. I looked up. A face peered down at me through the glass. I screamed. The thing jerked back, vanishing into the darkness. I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking so bad I could barely grip them. The engine roared to life. I slammed it into reverse, then drive, then reverse again. The wheels spun in the mud. The car didn't move an inch. More shadows moved in the trees. More cracking branches. They were all around the car now. I hit the high beams. The lights caught nothing but empty forest. But I could hear them moving out there, circling the vehicle. The temperature kept dropping. Ice crystals spread across the windows in intricate patterns. The heater was running full blast, but I couldn't stop shivering. Something hit the roof hard, making the whole car shake. Then again, and again, like something, was pounding on it with their fists. I covered my ears, but I couldn't block out the sounds, the pounding, the scratching, and worst of all, the whispers. I couldn't make out words, but I could hear voices, dozens of them speaking in low, urgent tones just outside the car. They seemed to be arguing about something. About me. The assault on the car continued for hours. Sometimes the things would go quiet for a few minutes, making me think they'd left. Then they'd start up again louder than before, pounding, scratching, whispering. I curled up in the driver's seat, shaking with cold and terror. The dashboard clock ticked forward with agonizing slowness. 10 p.m., 11:09 p.m., midnight. Around 1 a.m. they changed tactics. "Help me!" a woman's voice called from the woods. "Please, somebody help!" I knew it wasn't real. It couldn't be real, but it sounded so human, so desperate. "Please, I'm hurt. Help me!" The voice moved closer, accompanied by sounds of stumbling, branches breaking. "I can see your car. Please." The voice was right outside my window now. Every fiber of my being screamed not to look, but I couldn't help it. I turned my head slowly. A pale face pressed against the glass, inches from mine. It looked almost human, almost. But the eyes were solid black, and the mouth contained too many teeth. I jerked away, slamming my head against the other window. The thing outside smiled, its face splitting open far wider than any human mouth could. Then it began to tap on the glass with long, skeletal fingers. Tap, tap, tap. Other faces appeared at the windows, dozens of them, all with those black eyes, all with those two wide smiles, all tapping on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. I squeezed my eyes shut and pressed my hands over my ears, but I could still hear them, still feel their presence outside the car, still sense their hunger. I don't know how long I stayed like that. Time lost all meaning. There was only the cold, the tapping, and the absolute certainty that if I opened my eyes, they would still be there. Watching. Waiting. The first hint of dawn saved me. As the sky began to lighten, the tapping stopped. The temperature slowly rose. When I finally opened my eyes, the windows were clear of frost. The forest was empty. I sat there for another hour, waiting for full daylight. My whole body ached from being cramped in the same position all night. My throat was raw from screaming. At 7:23 a.m., a pickup truck came down the road. The driver, an old farmer, stopped and helped winch my car out of the ditch. He didn't seem surprised to find me there. "Took the shortcut, didn't you?" He didn't wait for an answer. "GPS always sends folks down this way, bunch of nonsense. Road's been closed for 20 years, ever since the massacre at the Thompson place." He jerked his thumb back toward the White House I'd passed. I didn't ask about the massacre. I didn't want to know. The spare tire got me to the nearest town. I gave my statement to a bored-looking sheriff's deputy who'd clearly heard similar stories before. He wrote down the basics and told me to stick to the main roads next time. I bought 4 new tires and drove straight home, taking the highway. I deleted that GPS app and downloaded a different one. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that tapping. Still feel that bone-deep cold. Still see those faces with their black eyes and twisted smiles. And I never, ever take shortcuts anymore. The GPS tried to send me down that road again last week. I turned around and took the long way home. Better to spend an extra hour in traffic than another night in those woods. Because I know they're still there, waiting in the darkness. Waiting for the next person who trusts their GPS more than local warnings. Waiting for someone else to take that wrong turn. If you're driving through Vermont and your GPS suggests a shortcut through the back country, ignore it. Stick to the main roads. Check your paper maps. Ask locals for directions. Because technology doesn't know everything. It doesn't know about the things that live in those woods. The things that come out after dark. The things that tap on windows with their long, pale fingers. The things that are always hungry and always waiting.